Salutations! This should be an exciting one because we have two seasoned debaters who will go at it here just in a few moments. Firstly, we have Reid, who has an extensive history of debates against theists. Then we have Smokey Saint, who also has gone toe-to-toe with quite a few atheists as well. I appreciate both of our debaters for engaging tonight. Before they face off, I think it's proper for them to give brief introductions about themselves, just so the audience can get a little bit more acquainted. So, since Mark is on the right side, I'll hand it up to Mark first. And if you want to say anything to the audience, Mark, about yourself or what you're trying to do, go ahead, man.
Yeah, I don't think I'm seasoned. I've only done like half a dozen debates or so, so I don't think seasoned would be an accurate representation. Maybe lightly salted is maybe the more accurate thing. But I'm just an average internet denizen. I enjoy debate. I enjoy discussing these things with people. I'm not out to monetize or anything like that. I just really enjoy doing this. It's great to be here, and thank you, Praise, for hosting this debate. It's fantastic, and thank you, Smokey, for giving me the time to present my case. I basically study at university. I study data transmission and networking of systems, but I'm here to because I don't think that morality comes from God. So I'm in the negative, and I'm here to present the case that morality, in fact, doesn't come from any God.
Very good. I appreciate that, Mark. Do you have like a YouTube channel like you're active on, or?
I do. I'm semi-active. I would have to find it, to be honest with you. Oh, you put me on the spot here. What's my YouTube channel again? Yeah, I'd have to find it, but I'll grab that for you, and you know.
Great. No problem, man. So we'll hand out to Smokey. So Smokey, I know you've been active on your channel, and I know people know about you. You're active in our community. So is there anything else you want to say to our audience before we get going here?
Indeed, no. I think probably most of the people that are here probably know me. I did invite a lot of people from the new subscribers and post it on the community tab. So I hope we have lots of new faces here tonight. I hope everyone here enjoys the show. I do look forward to this engagement. I have since we set it up, actually. So yes, appreciation, praise to you for hosting it, and certainly you as well, Mark, for showing up and willing to engage with me. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for your introduction. Now we'll head into the debate itself. So tonight's format is 10 to 12 minute openings, 3 to 5 minute rebuttals, and the rest will be open discussion, then a short closing, and they'll have a short closing, then we'll have the Q&A, audience Q&A. So please tag me. Also, I want to let people know that I predicate myself as being a neutral moderator, so if the audience has any criticism or feedback, please let me know. And with that, we're going to give the floor to Smokey. The floor is yours. I'll start the timer whenever you're ready.
Beautiful. Excellent. And we're good to go. All right. Well, thank you so much, folks, for being here this evening. This is actually an important topic to me because this was actually something that was a struggle for me during my time in agnosticism or atheism. And this is something that I spent a lot of time suffering through to figure out, not just I would say, the sterile philosophical justification for the existence of morality and any potential ontology, but also a value system as to not only whether or not morals actually exist and can be epistemologically or ontologically justified, but really the structure of morality and how it actually has value to the individual. During the discussion tonight, I hope to demonstrate both a philosophical justification as well as a moral one. I'd like to read you guys a quote, and it is, "No evil and no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference." And this was spoken by none other than Richard Dawkins, a well-known evolutionary biologist that many atheists are familiar with. The fact of the matter is that based upon the atheistic worldview, there really is no frame of reference to latch onto for a justification for that which is truly objectively moral. At some level, in some way, this always breaks down to some form of relativistic justification for that which should be moral. And in that case, are we even really discussing morality at all anymore? Without any objective reference point, at most, generally, we are speaking about preferences. Preferences based upon culture, breeding, nurturing, our nature, where we've grown up, what we were exposed to. All of these can play a role unless there is actually some objective footing that can allow us to push past a very subjective relativistic framework. From the perspective of the naturalist, the evolutionist, it's very hard to even claim that there's any justification to claim morals even exist at all. Their entire existence, from their frame of reference, from their ontology, is really just a matter of matter in motion, a happenstance, really. They themselves are a product of a series of evolutionary happenstances that led to more complex life and ultimately to us being this high thinking, moral, rational species. But in their mind, all of this justification, all of this thinking, all of this higher thought, all of this morality is nothing other than a product of evolution. And evolution does not deal in morality or deal in right or wrong. It simply deals in that which is best for the survival of the species. So, how could a naturalist or an evolutionist even claim to be moral, thinking that their very thinking of morality could be nothing other than an evolutionary construct, something that happens to have formed in their mind with no other justification than part of the naturalistic evolutionary paradigm that has convinced them that this moral code that they've taken to be something in the essence of good really is nothing other than a series of chemical reactions that are developed through evolutionary means to develop something inside the creature in order to push for, well, survival. And if that's true, then there really is no actual claim to anything that is ultimately moral or good. It's all based upon that which just happened to be and that which happened to be produced through evolution. We see that inside the natural animal kingdom, there's no real grasp of the type of morals that we attempt to enforce in our modern civil society. Things like rape and incest, many other atrocities, murder, killing for sport, all of these things are seen all throughout the animal kingdom. So, how is it that we can possibly think that what has evolved, what has emerged, from such a chaotic and evolutionary focused paradigm of survival of the fittest is only going to lead to anything that's actually transcendental moral in any real regard. I find that generally atheistic morality is much like attempting to construct a house on clouds. Really, at the end, it may look like you might have an idea up in the structural part of it, but once you get down to the foundation, you found that there really isn't much there, isn't anything for the foundational structure of morality to actually lean upon. I will approach this now from a certain anecdotal area to give you guys an idea of some of my perspectives as to how even some of the best intending atheist philosophy about morality and ethics can actually completely fall apart very quickly based upon circumstance. There is a common relativistic moral argument out there from the naturalists these days that goes along the lines of this: you want to minimize pain while maximizing pleasure, and attempting to do so and to help engage in that with every other human being on earth will help provide a better way of life. Now, this isn't so much a moral argument as it is simply a claim that they want pleasure and therefore pleasure is moral. There isn't usually a good justification for that, but many people can get on board with the idea that pleasure is good and pain is bad. Therefore, maximizing pleasure and minimizing pain should or could, from a naturalist perspective of secular humanism, be considered to be a good mechanism of which to glean some form of semi-objective morality. But this does, unfortunately, can lead to what we would call, I guess you would say, a moral horror. In the pursuit, and I'll just put this anecdotal scenario out in front of you of the idea of maximizing pleasure and minimizing pain, if that was how you were going to go about it, you could come across a scenario of recognition that people's pleasure is proportionately based upon the amount of available resources. The more people that are on Earth, the less resources that are available, and therefore the less potential pleasure for the individuals that happen to be living. Atheism itself has a propensity to give people license, and there is pretty heavy statistics to show that atheists do have a propensity for substance abuse, self-destructive behavior, as well as suicide. So really, from the atheist perspective, it's a moral positive to push atheism so that more people commit suicide, so that there's more resources to go around, so that more people have more pleasure for those that are alive, and those that would be born into pain don't have to suffer that pain, and they can give up their portion of the resources to those who would be able to then optimize their pleasure. So as you can see, with a minor shift in some perspective based upon circumstance, what seems to be a perfectly justified moral standard for many secular humanists can very well lead into outright genocide if put in the controlling hands of the wrong people. Now, I say this because I would like to be able to draw a true dichotomy, not just on the ontology, origin, and justification philosophically for that which we call morality, but also its value as to how it is we come to an understanding that the moral standards that we hold to actually have value. And this will go a little bit into nihilism, so bear with me, but I will finish on this point before I hand it over to my opponent. In the reality of the naturalist, where everyone is basically subjectively coming up, or culturally coming up with their own moral standard, it doesn't have any objective footing, therefore doesn't have any objective value, therefore arguably doesn't really have any value at all. Just as much as you can have or manifest your own value from an atheistic point of view by pursuing hobbies or career opportunities or gleaning wealth or collecting cars or houses, that pursuit of value will ultimately generally only be valuable to you and your immediate relations. It will not have an objective value to others. So does it really have value if it only has value to you? And such is the conundrum also with morality. If morality is truly subjective, how can we claim it to have any level of actual universal value of which everyone can adhere to? Without a value justification, there's really no good reason for someone to want to incorporate certain moral concepts into their framework. And it's easier to just accept the reality for what it is, that they are just a random collection of bubbling chemicals, matter in motion, stardust that happen to have collided into a complex formulation of apparently sentient matter, and that this thing apparently this mass of random composed chemicals and matter is going to somehow claim that it is morally wrong for that bag of chemicals to harm another bag of chemicals. Evolution, naturalism not only cannot explain nor give any good ontology for the nature of morality, but it can't even give it a reasonable value range for which people to adopt it, nor any objective value range to get people to want to value it objectively above just their own personal whims and desires. And I guess with that, I'll concede the rest to our cross-examination and rebuttal periods, and I will yield the rest of my time to my opponent. Thank you so much.
All right, so you're about a minute under. I guess we'll put that at time in the open discussion. Thank you so much, Smokey. So we're going to hand over to Mark Reid now. Whenever you're ready, Mark, we'll start the timer.
Yeah, I just need to share my screen.
Sure.
Okay. All right, so this is does morality come from God? And I'm, of course, taking the negative, which is no, it doesn't. I see no reason why it should. Now, I just want to give a disclaimer first off. Morality is incredibly complex. There's a lot of disagreement, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of nuance. Anybody that's done any of these trolley problems or these morality dilemmas, the prisoner's dilemma, will know that these questions of morality can get very, very, very complex, and there is a lot of disagreement between people, and even the goals of morality is incredibly complex and varies significantly. Just first define morality, because people may have different definitions of morality. Usually I would use descriptively to refer to certain codes of conduct put forward by society or a group, but I accept that other people may have different definitions. Now, the one thing that I do want to say is that definitions are descriptive. They're usages of words. They're not prescriptive of the actuality of things. They don't give things their reality. They just describe how somebody is using them. So I want to quickly just look at the morality of the theological people. There is some variation. This isn't an actual, hard, concrete case of this is what they believe. But it's generally the morality is prescriptive of how we should behave. And it's claimed to have been decided by an all-powerful being and independent of our own values or our own judgments. There is a prescribed way that people should behave. Now, what has to be demonstrated to believe that God has actually given anybody a morality? Well, firstly, a God's got to exist. So firstly, you've got to demonstrate a God. Secondly, the God's got to be a monotheistic God. So a God of a pantheon, you don't get universal morals from a pantheon. What you get is that God's morals as opposed to another God's morals. So if you're talking about the Greek system, the God of war will have a different moral structure than, Ares, the God of war, will have a different moral structure than Athena, the God of wisdom. Now, this is really important, and keep this in mind, because when we're saying, hey, God gave us universal morals, they can't be part of a pantheon. God must have an interest in designating a moral code. This rules out stuff like deistic gods, ones that basically have no interest in humans. And the God obviously has to have the power to implement this into reality. So that's what I would consider a good demonstration of God. Now, the diversity of moral thought is the biggest problem for this. So all of these systems have their own moral structure. All claim to be objective. All claim to be the universal morals that have been prescribed to humans. And they're all different. And they all disagree on what that universal moral prescription is. And they all have fought wars killing each other to prove that their path or their structure is the correct one. Now, we have no reason to believe any of them. They all, I agree with all of them. None of them have universal morals, and they can't seem to demonstrate that they have universal morals. There's some common threads between them, and I'll get to why that is. But the huge disagreements have resulted in the most catastrophic wars and the most heinous slaughters in the history of mankind. We can point at the Crusades, we can point at the Inquisition, we can point at numerous religious schisms that have caused death and destruction across the world. Hardly a moral system going on here. So they all claim to have the true morality. They cannot all be true. No religion can demonstrate their morality as the correct one. Therefore, we have no reason to believe any religion has divinely inspired morality. That's just a summation of what I went through. Now, biblically epic morality problems. This is concerning the God of Israel. So Yahweh was originally a storm god in the pantheon. Now, remember what I said about pantheons. It's only that one god's opinion versus all the other gods. The pantheon was led by El. So Yahweh wasn't even the chief god in this pantheon. And there was other gods around like Baal, Chemosh, Milcom. They all had different moral structures. And some of them were killed by the Israelites for daring to disagree with them. So this is another problem for the Christian moral system, that their God is just the guy that won and got sort of assimilated into all these other gods. And that's, scholars will absolutely agree that is the history of Yahweh, the God of Israel. There were other gods that representing other peoples around at the time. So how can morals exist without gods or gods? Basically, we've got various different structures. Now, I subscribe to secular humanism. Now, notice that atheism isn't in here, and I'll get to that later in my rebuttal, but I subscribe to secular humanism, so that's the one I'll focus on. There are other systems. Some of them are compatible, some of them are not compatible, but this is the one I want to focus on because this is the one I would present because I follow this moral thought, I know the most about it. So certain traits are present throughout social mammals that allow us to have tools to evaluate morality. So what we have here is the biological functions of empathy and reciprocity. Now, I would argue that these aren't moral systems in themselves. They don't tell us what we ought to do, they just give us feelings about things. So they don't comprise a moral system. But biologically, we all feel empathy and we all feel reciprocity. Now, I can point to this in other animals. For instance, Jambo the gorilla, when a young child fell in his enclosure, he comforted the child and tried to protect that child against other gorillas, basically showed empathy. There was also an experiment with monkeys. It was done a long time ago and we probably wouldn't approve it today, but basically a monkey was given a treat for shocking another monkey. So it would push a button, the monkey would be shocked and be given a treat. Now, upon seeing the other monkey hurting and in pain from what it was doing, it refused the treat. It wouldn't do it for its own benefit. It basically refused it. With reciprocity, there was another experiment done in a lab where they basically had a monkey being given a piece of cucumber for doing the task and a monkey being given a grape for the other task. Now, the first monkey was fine with the cucumber, but upon seeing the other monkey get the grape, it basically got mad and refused the cucumber. It actually threw it back to the people. It didn't want it, even though it was fine before it saw the other monkey get the grape. This is reciprocity. This is our idea of fairness. And as I said, this doesn't make a moral system in itself, but we can use these as tools. And they are common throughout social mammals in particular. So what we're going to look at now is meta-ethical frameworks and meta-ethical relativism. So meta-ethics is kind of what makes good good and what makes bad bad. So if we can agree on what makes good good and what makes bad bad, and keep in mind that this may be a subjective agreement. We might all subjectively agree that pleasure is good. We might all subjectively agree that sort of comfort is good. And we can do this by appealing to certain things within people's needs and wants. So secular humanism, and this ties into that, secular humanism relies on utilitarianism. The utility is actually well-being, which isn't necessarily what we want. It's what we need to be well. And I define well-being as physical and psychological health. There's certain things, it was put in sort of a Maslow's hierarchy, which has changed, but the principle remains the same. There's certain things that humans need to be well. Physical things like food and water and shelter, and there's psychological things like self-actualization, safety, being able to express yourself. And these can make up a framework of what we need to be well. And therefore, if we can agree that well-being of yourself and of society is important, then we have a framework for some objective moral imperatives, because we can tell what is good for well-being and what is bad for well-being. It's superior to religious moral systems, because no religions can agree on the framework. As I said, there's tons of religions that all have a different framework, all based upon different gods. They cannot agree. It's also superior because it's dynamic and changes. Why is that good? Why is changing morality good? It's because we have new things to address that old religious texts do not. What is old religious texts' stance on cloning or GMO foods? And yeah, okay, well, I've run out of time, so I do apologize. I will leave it there. But that's basically, and I'll just leave with all that which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. The existence of moral systems, secular moral systems, means that we do not need a God for moral systems. We can do this ourselves, and it has been demonstrated time and time again. I thank you for your time, and I don't want to go over, so I'll leave it there.
All right, Mark, thank you for your opening. You both had enthralling openings there. So we're going to head into the rebuttal period. This will be a shorter period, 5 to 7 minutes. A little bit over, that's fine, but we'll try to keep it around there. So, Smokey, whenever you're ready, man, I'll start the timer for your rebuttal.
Sure, absolutely. 1 second.
Sure.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that, Mark. Appreciate it. I'll just need a few minutes, Praise. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Okay, so I did see during the opening a statement, God must be demonstrated to be used as an ontology to the moral argument. To me, for this debate, that feels a little bit like putting the cart before the horse. I certainly am not expecting, and I'm not sure if Mark is expecting this to turn into a does God exist argument before we can talk about if morality is tied to God. The function of my argumentation is not around that type of mechanism of arguing, but really to state the idea that the simple ability to state that an objective moral must exist, that a good must exist, is therefore tying to something objective outside of us. And the best explanation at that point is a mind and a moral God. I would say objectivity isn't necessarily negated by the existence of subjective agents. So just because there's a bunch of religions that just disagree is completely irrelevant to whether or not objectivity and morality actually exists, because some could be right and some could be wrong. So just because there happens to be disagreement, in no way, shape, or form would actually, in any way that I can see as any argumentation, show that objective morality should be challenged on that level. If you have subjective agents that disagree on something, there still stands the objective truth, whether or not that thing is actually true. And one can be mistaken. It doesn't mean necessarily that there's disagreement, that both have to be mistaken. So I think the whole claim of different religions having different perspectives is basically wholly irrelevant to the debate. Not all of them on the list of the religions actually disagree. That's kind of an important thing too. In fact, many of them would even follow secular humanistic lines of thinking. So in just disregarding all of them is really even disregarding some of the framework that I think Mark is attempting to use for his justification. I did want to say this: you talk about a lot of wars coming from religion. Actually, I believe if you go to the Encyclopedia of Wars, you guys can pull it up on Google. I think it's about less than 7% of all recorded wars actually had to do with religion. You can talk about the Crusades, which I think many Christians and scholars would agree even had a pretty heavy political leaning to it, and were really just a backlash, a reaction to what was a bloody Muslim conquest across most of southern Europe. So there's moral components in the idea of war when war is okay, and that's something else for a debate on ethics in terms of what is justified and not justified in war. And I don't want to get too deep on that. The mention of Yahweh as the storm god, I don't know how accurate you are on that, Mark. I did a little reading on that recently. Baal was actually called a cloud rider in some of the ancient contemporary manuscripts, I believe. And we do see that actually stolen in terms of cultural imagery used to refer to Yahweh. And this is actually common in the ancient Near East. You actually also see this in Psalm 104, where you have David who is actually constructing a response hymn to a hymn that was written to an Egyptian deity. And in response to that, he uses very, very similar imagery, structure, and prose to actually point to Yahweh as the true God. And you actually see this littered all throughout Scripture of the Bible writers using imagery of contemporary cultures in order to act as polemics against those deities and communicating in a common culturally recognized fashion. Cuneiform parallels in ancient Near East studies in no way discredit the Bible. In fact, I would argue in many instances tend to credit it much greater. Rob Rowe would be a better one to talk about that over at Sentinel Apologetics. Empathy isn't, when he talks about, and I recognize it, those are the two pillars of secular humanism, morality. I recognize them, empathy and reciprocity. Problem is, empathy isn't universally felt by all creatures, and it isn't universally felt at the same level by all creatures. Reciprocity is also very subjective in its application. The framework itself is purely subjective. Who decides how much empathy and how much reciprocity needs to be filled? Maybe someone gets appropriate reciprocity in their mind and another person doesn't feel that it was appropriate reciprocity. These are all ultimately still very subjective level justified perspectives that then you could not really build any type of actual moral stance on. Christianity, however, calls for supererogatory acts or acts of extreme love or self-sacrifice for the benefit of another person. Secular humanism really has no mechanism to justify this type of action or demonstration of love. The number of subjective agents disagreeing, I already covered that. We said well-being is important. I do see secular humanists say that a lot. Yet, oddly enough, they also tend to be the people that are pro-abortion, which I find to be pretty hypocritical. I'm not saying Mark is. I don't know his stance on that. But if you would hold to the idea that well-being is important, I wonder if it would extend to those humans inside the womb as well. Other than that, all religions tend to agree that well-being is good. Of course, some exceptions stand in contrast, so it doesn't necessarily do anything to bolster or defeat the case of naturalistic morality. I guess with that, I'll yield.
Awesome. So 6 minutes. Pretty good there, Smokey. We'll hand it over to Mark Reid for his rebuttal. When you're ready, Mark, we'll start your
Should
timer.
have cut me off at 5, but okay, yeah, no, he
Yeah,
can take,
thanks.
yeah, no, take as much as you want, Mark.
Sure,
seriously.
absolutely.
Even if you want to go over 6, don't rush. Go ahead,
Yeah.
take your time.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'll try to be pretty quick. First off, I mean, I hear about your agnosticism. It is just an anecdotal evidence. It doesn't really provide anything new. It led you to God. It led other people to other gods. It led other people to, some other moral system. It doesn't really say anything. You said that morality has low value for people like me. It doesn't. Morality has a very high value for me. And I want to make this clear, the designation between moral relativism and moral nihilism, which is sort of what you're suggesting, that morals, since they don't exist, they don't have any value. Well, that's just not true. They're very, very, very important. You said, Richard Dawkins said, atheism has no evil, no good, no... Yes, atheism has no morals. That's why we don't use atheism to determine a moral framework. As made clear, I'm a secular humanist. Atheism answers only one question. Do you believe in God? It doesn't have anything else to say but that. So that's really just a red herring completely. There is no... atheism is a moral wasteland because it doesn't deal with morals. It's like asking why a submarine technician doesn't deal with aircraft. It's because it's not what it's for. So no objective morality. Yeah, that's right. That's what I'm saying. And I do want objective morals. That would be great if there were objective morals that everybody could follow and there was no nuance and it was perfectly clear. But that isn't what we've got. And that just, I do not see to delude myself from the truth because I want something. So whether or not you want it has no bearing on whether it's true or not. You called evolution stuff, which is a complete side, it's not the topic for the debate, but I'll touch on it because you did. You said it's happenstance, implying that it's random. That's completely wrong. It's deterministic. Empathy and reciprocity isn't random. They are the things that have allowed social mammals to survive and therefore have been reinforced in the human species. It's not random. It's deterministic. You said stuff about chemical reactions. It's a complete straw man. It's more nuanced than just chemical reactions. There's a lot of input we have from our social circle, learned behavior. It's just a very, very sort of simplistic way of saying, hey, the brain uses chemicals, therefore everything's chemicals. No, not true. Again, you said it just happened. No, it didn't just happen. It's deterministic. There is a system that has reinforced these things into the human species. You mentioned survival of the fittest. Yeah, that's a bad moral system. We don't use that. It's a straw man. It's sort of saying, hey, because evolution exists, then we have to use evolution as a moral system. No, that's not right. We're not using evolution as a moral system. Again, not what it's for. Again, you went to a lot of anecdotal evidence. You said about minimizing pain and maximizing pleasure. Again, that's a straw man. That is not my metric. It's not the metric of any atheist I've ever talked to. Or rather, I'll clarify that. It's not the metric of any secular humanist I've ever talked to.
Cosmic Skeptic used to go in on that a lot, by the way. That was his paradigm for a while. I don't know if he's...
Well, you're not talking to Cosmic Skeptic, so whatever he's got to say. Well, if he is just to minimize pain and maximizing pleasure, I would probably disagree with him. So sort of you touched on resources, a lack of resources, and suicide. Like, I don't understand how suicide would make well-being better. Not in the well part or the being, because you're basically eliminating people. You said you mentioned genocide. It would lead to how is genocide enhancing well-being? Would be my question. It doesn't. It in no way does it do that. So I mentioned that moral nihilism is not a moral relativism. You said you have no objective footing. No, you're right. And I'd like there to be an objective footing. But just because I want something doesn't make it true. And once we have an agreement between people, and it is true that people do value their own well-being and the well-being of the society around them, because no person's an island. The value of the society around you does affect you, but more than that, we're conditioned to care about the society around us. So you mentioned universal values. Well, we don't have that with religion either. the values are all different. And as much as you want to say, hey, there's some common threads, which I would submit are due to these biological imperatives that have been determined to allow us to survive, we don't have a universal value. Again, another strawman bag of chemicals. I think I mentioned that earlier. But yeah, that's all I really had to say on Smokey's introduction.
Awesome, Mark. So we're going to head now into the open discussion. This will be, up in the air, played by what's that old? I forget the stupid thing, but I'm just going to head into the open discussion here. So,
Sure.
Since Mark, Reid ended, we'll start with Smokey, played by Ear.
There was kind of a lot there, Mark. Maybe if you don't mind, can you kind of go through the bullet points of that again, and I can just kind of try to address them kind of one by one of your rebuttal there.
The whole thing. All right. Well,
do you mind? Do you mind? Because okay. I just don't want to misrepresent or miss something, because you actually did have some points in there I really want to actually.
Okay. Well, I would skip over, your particular story, and don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to minimize that story. I understand that it is important to you, but it is an anecdote from my perspective.
That's fine.
That morality has low value isn't true. That most secular humanists and atheists value morality very highly. So I don't think that's in fact true.
Would you agree that they value it subjectively, though?
No. I would say that the framework that it's built upon would be subjective, but they make objective decisions based on that framework.
You said that, like, atheists, for instance, like, if they can agree, like, it's basically that, and I've heard Dillahunty pitch that too. Like, if you can get two people to agree, then that now takes on objective morality.
Yes. It doesn't take on it's what it is that your meta-ethical standpoint. So meta-ethics is what is good and what is bad. That's subjective, but then inside that framework, that meta-ethical framework, your moral and ethical designations or imperatives are objective with reference to that framework.
Well, but in order for them to be objective, they would have to be objectively agreed to, wouldn't they? I mean, the subjective agents would have to agree to them from your frame of reference.
No, we can analyze them. We can quantify well-being. We can do analysis of what is good for someone and what is bad. I mean, the entire principle of medicine is that you can objectively tell what is good for somebody and what is bad, physically, of course. I think the same is true for psychology and psychiatry. I think you can objectively say that, holding someone in a basement and, calling them names is going to be objectively bad for their psychological well-being.
Well, I think we could talk about that. There's a lot of subjectives in that those do not lead to objective truths. 30, 40 years ago, we treated people with gender dysphoria a very certain way, believing that they needed to be cured. And today we identify it as, a nature of someone's identity of who they want to be. So here, medicine is not in the position of making moral judgments. I think that the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm, is simply as far as it can possibly go. But again,
they don't use that anymore.
Okay, well, each subject.
They actually use the Oath of Geneva, which is do what's in the best interests of your patient. We've actually updated that because do no harm means that you can't chop somebody's leg off if they've got gangrene, for instance.
Right, okay.
Because you're doing harm. Now they've updated it to do what's in the best interests of your patient.
So if someone is terminal and in pain, it is within their best well-being to let them kill themselves, right?
Well, it's something that you would have to take into consideration because at a foundation, the empathy and reciprocity gives you a list of basic rights, as I mentioned. So like the Maslow's hierarchy or like psychological well-being hierarchies, you have these things that every single creature wants there to be. For instance, every single creature wants to feel safe. Every single creature needs food. Every single human needs water. So we can build basic rights from this, and one is the right to autonomy, which encapsulates the right to safety, the right to health, and the right to express yourself.
Right. You had said something about how you didn't understand how suicide would lead to well-being. And I
Yes.
just wanted to reiterate what that argument was.
Sure, go ahead.
And it's the idea that, again, well-being or the ability to enjoy a good life is in many instances very proportionately tied to availability of resources. Third world countries are prolifically poor, as well as having a tendency to be incredibly overpopulated. In fact, that's part of what is recognized as some of the issues in some of these poorer countries is massive population without the infrastructure to really necessarily handle them. And that leads to a lot of suffering. So by minimizing life, you maximize well-being. This has just always been the case. This is why wars break out. This is why farmers feud over land. This is why nations invade so that they can have better cropland. All of this is based around the idea of doing what's best for me before worrying about what's best for someone else. And actually, that seems to be what you kind of just presented, and there's a problem with empathy.
Well, I would like to address that before
Okay, no,
you
go ahead.
go on.
All right, go ahead. Sure, go ahead.
So, as I said, we have these sort of basic, I call them, they're sort of biological rights based upon these foundations of empathy and reciprocity. But aside from that, yeah, it becomes sort of nuanced, and when you prioritize your own well-being versus the well-being of your society, and we can sort of discuss what makes the best case for well-being, as long as we don't inviolate those biological rights that we have. However, I fail to see how suicide, killing yourself because you're not well psychologically at that point.
Oh yeah,
and
but
you're not. Hold on, let me finish. And physically, you're not well because you're dead. And you're not even being because you're dead. You're not. You don't exist anymore.
You're missing the point. You're missing the point. If someone wants to die, shouldn't they be allowed to make that choice for themselves?
I think that if they are psychologically well, so they can make that decision, then yeah.
You really think someone who's suicidal would ever be considered?
Well, I think under the circumstances, if somebody is like in pain and suffering and has a disease that is going to kill them, then they may rationally make the decision to end that suffering instead of suffering.
So here's the problem.
Yeah.
We're communicating at two different levels. I'm talking about from that moral paradigm of well-being of overall, and you're talking about the paradigm of well-being to the individual. And see,
no, I'm talking about both.
Well, but I'm saying that the termination of life of one can offer the opportunity of increased resources and availability of space even to someone else who is living. So the person who was suffering dies, no longer suffers, and the person who was also suffering next to them now continues and no longer suffers because they have the resources of the person who died. This is just very, very simple, basic logic of the nature of the world, which is why Christianity, which pushes for people to be benevolent and universally giving and generous, is that which leads to a better cultural moral norm.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think that Christianity has led to some horrendous things. And just because Christianity says this, well, I mean, you've got, do you really want me to spell out all the things that Christianity has done that's been reprehensible in the past?
Well, are you going to talk about actual Christians that did it, or are you going to talk about pagan political agents?
Because, okay, so here's a good time to bring up the major problem with theistic. So let's go for the youth and fro and see where that leads us. So
I don't think you would appreciate
these things. Yeah, if I could just finish.
All right.
So does God command these things because they're good, or are they good because God commands them?
A goodness, I actually adhere to divine simplicity. So God himself is good. Goodness is not a component of him or simply an extension of him, but it actually is him. It is
So-
of his essence.
So just so I can understand that, because that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, it's that when God commands it, it is good. It's like, because
If
God is
God
commanding it's good.
did command it, it would have to be good by nature of him being good.
Okay.
So him being the nature of goodness, the essence of goodness, that which would flow, would necessarily have to be good.
So, but that means if God commanded people to kill each other, that would be good.
Higher good, sure. Yeah, and that
Higher good.
you're talking about a situation of moral dilemma leveraging, which I'm sure you don't want to do. But
So
the issue is that the other option is far worse generally, or more monstrous.
Really?
Generally, yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
So if people believe, if God commands, say, a certain race to die and commit genocide,
like the Amalekites, sure, yeah.
Sure, then that is a good act.
Yes, absolutely. I think
Yeah.
a bunch of murderous, vile, slave trading barbarians that were terrorizing the peoples and cultures around them being put to accountability of their cultural decisions and actions. I think that's in fact, I think it's something we even do today.
Including the children.
Well, if that was the best available opportunity to what was the converse was more monstrous, then sure. I mean, it doesn't matter. Atheists complain when they're taken as slaves, and atheists complain when they're killed. So there's no.
I just want to clarify here that your idea of morality is to go into villages, kill every single person in there, kill all the animals, kill all the young boys, and take the young girls back into your tribe.
If back then in an ancient Near East culture with limited resources availability and stopping people from doing monstrous things like rape and temple service and then sacrificing their children on altars to Moloch, there's a mercy in that. Yeah.
So
it may sound harsh, but there is a mercy in that. There actually is.
This is the problem with Christian morality. It's whatever you think God commands you to do.
It's simply
becomes
it's just
moral.
No,
so you
Mark,
can go into villages,
you're leveraging a moral
everybody,
dilemma. You're leveraging a moral dilemma.
Take the children for yourself, but only the female children.
Mark,
take them back to your tribe to use them for whatever you want to as slaves.
You're leveraging a moral
and then claim that that is moral because God whatever God commands you to do is moral.
Yeah, let Smokey finish.
He just wants to railroad over it because he thinks that this is like a gotcha moment. Oh, look, a Christian says that people can be killed. So do atheists. And the issue is they always bring it down to the children. And let me tell you something. What should have been done with the children in the ancient Near East context in which these people lived, Mark? What was the moral decision of what was supposed to be done with these children who were probably molested, who were probably put into all horrible situations, who were probably mutilated by these disgusting, monstrous, hedonistic cultures that engaged in human sacrifice and bloodletting rituals? What is the higher moral thing? What should they have been done? Should the women just have been released out into the wilderness for the thieves and marauders to come and kidnap and rape? Or should they have been offered the chance to be a part of the kingdom and be married into a good Jewish family where they'd be given rights and protection? Again, this is just leveraging a moral dilemma. Once an atheist points out, oh, I don't like this. This is bad. Okay, and you ask them, okay, well, what's the other option? There generally isn't one, or the other option is more monstrous, and that's what I'm talking about.
Okay, so what we have here is just an appeal to emotion. There's no evidence that the Amalekites or Canaanites or any of the people that the tribes of Israel slaughtered in their droves did anything worse than the Israelites. That's
not true at all.
Present.
Oh, that's not true.
Can I finish,
that's
please?
A lie. Well, that's a lie.
Can I finish, please?
That's a false.
Can I finish, please? Can I finish?
Let her finish, Smokey, really quick.
Yeah,
we'll come back to you.
Wow. So, and what I would have done is basically you can capture people without killing them, and you can subjugate people without exterminating them. There's a reason why genocide is a war crime today. It's because you wipe out an entire race, and that from any standpoint of moral system is evil. There's other things you can do. And the Israelites basically went into these lands. They didn't even own these lands. They were visitors in these lands, which it clearly says in the Bible. But because God told them to kill everybody and then take their lands from them and take everything off them, that's exactly what they did. So today the problem comes that if people believe that God is telling them to kill all the atheists or kill all these people, it automatically becomes good. If they think God says to wipe every Muslim from the face of the planet, it automatically becomes good, and that's your problem. You have no frame of reference for good and bad because it's whatever you think God tells you to do.
Okay, can I respond?
Go for it.
All right. First of all, there is a straw man of the use of hyperbolic war poetry in the ancient Near East. Mark Reid is attempting to apply a literalistic approach, which is both uneducated and unscholarly. In fact, many modern scholars do understand hyperbolic war poetry, and especially when it comes to the Amalekites, which is one of the ones I brought up because atheists love to bring those up. The Amalekites are referenced even after the time that their city was invaded as having still been alive in the region, and this is actually in 2 Kings. So they weren't completely wiped out, but hyperbolic war poetry would have that type of intensive statement that they should go and just wipe out everything out. And because of the type of demonstration that was given to an envoy to take to the city, those that believed or felt that they were in danger would flee the city and go out into the wilderness, and they wouldn't actually be in danger. They could save their own lives and that of their children. So if they wanted to actually defy what was coming their way, wanted to stay in their disgusting, immoral culture, then they were going to face the penalties of that. Mark Reid, sir, I'm sorry, you just told a blatant fallacy and lie about the history of the ancient Near East. These contemporary cultures surrounding the Jews were monstrous. They didn't have any appreciation of human rights, and all you need to do is look at the moral codes, even the ones of Hammurabi. There's no rules against or laws against someone killing a slave. Slave were indeed chattel in all the contemporary cultures. In the Jewish culture, a slave master could actually be killed for a death of a slave under his care. That's unparalleled, unknown in any of the other ancient contemporaries. Slaves were given human rights. Servant class were citizens as well as members of households that were regarded as part of family. They were not treated simply like property or possessions or animals, as many atheists present. And these instances where the people were taken over, they were given every available opportunity to repent. Even says that God had prophets in the area telling them to stop and gave them 400 years, particularly the Amalekites, 400 years to repent of their atrocities. And they did not. They continued to pillage and murder and rape and kidnap and force into slavery and murder children on altars to Moloch. And I guess Mark thinks maybe it would have been better just to leave those cultures alone. Let them continue to brutalize and murder their citizens and treat them horribly. And yes, it is a lie that they didn't do this, Mark. It's very, very supported in lots of scholarly references that are even extra biblical, that these ancient contemporary cultures, including the Canaanite region of the northern part of Israel, did engage in a lot of monstrous practices against their people.
Right, so let's have a look at this, and we see here the sort of immorality of Smokey's moral structure. He basically will apply war poetry to all of the things that in the Bible the Israelites admitted to doing, like killing people and stuff. But what he doesn't do is admit that it might be war poetry of the victors to vilify these other cultures, which scholars do acknowledge that most of these accounts are written by the victors. But Smokey just wants to ignore all of that, apply war poetry to the parts that he doesn't want to be true, and then apply actual literalism to the parts that he does want to be true. It's this selective designation of what is metaphor and what is not metaphor that shows that he cannot look at these things with either a reading of the text, and he has to apply his interpretation, which is
I get
Israelites good.
No, that's wrong.
Excuse me.
Can you stop lying about what I say, Mark? Can you just do me a favor? I've been trying
I'm
to
not
be
lying
real
about
honest.
what you
You
said.
are.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. So basically, he also said that all these people have fled the city, which is just a monstrous thing to say, because if you flee the city and escape from an immoral act, it doesn't make the act okay. In what world would that be okay? Hey, I killed this person's, family. Oh, but his wife managed to flee, so therefore it's okay. It's fine. That is just simply horrendous, and we're seeing the real horrible stuff that Smokey actually believes here. Slavery of households, well, the Israelites did slavery as well. And basically you're saying, hey, in that time, which you did say, in that time, this is what the contemporaries were like. And yeah, it shows relativistic morals, as though those societies did a lot of wrong. But that was what they were like at the time. You're basically proving relativistic morality right in front of our eyes. It all depends on the society that they're in. And no, I wouldn't allow them, if I was head of that tribe, to murder and pillage and do whatever they want. But I wouldn't genocide them either. Now, admittedly, that is looking from a modern perspective, that I have the benefit of thousands and thousands of years about learning about morality and what is in the best way to act. They didn't. But that just shows moral relativism, not universal morality.
Okay. Yeah, that you touched on it actually perfectly. It is actually just a brand of ethnocentric bigotry, because you're not there and you can't tell these people what they should have done better. You can't. And you're not there to make that case. You seem to just stand on the fence of the moral dilemmas. Like, yeah, they should stop them, but yeah, they shouldn't do it this way. Okay, what way? You don't have access to the same infrastructure, to the same resources, to the same abilities to provide. They were told to stop. They don't stop. How is it not on their hands? Like, if the law of the land is established that you're not supposed to, kidnap and murder rape people. And yes, it's not just from the Bible. And yes, the idea that the Amalekites, and this is where you lied about what I said in 2 Kings, it's not just my interpretation that this is hyperbolic war poetry, Mark. It actually says that the Amalekites did survive. There were Amalekites that still lived in that region after the fact. And we even know from contemporary sources that have been studying Islam that the Amalekites actually ended up settling in Petra, where they would be the predecessors of the Quraysh that would ultimately come from Muhammad. So we do know that these people did survive. It's not just my interpretation. It is what the text insinuates and states, that this is indeed actually hyperbolic war poetry. I'm sorry if that hurts your narrative, but it is true. So if you have the opportunity, if you're warned that they are going to come and stop you of your evil deeds, which it seems like you agree that they were doing evil deeds, and you decide to keep doing it instead of just giving it up and fleeing, I think your blood's on your hands, not on the people that are coming to stop you from doing bloody things.
Well, fence sitting on moral dilemmas. Yeah, I do think they didn't have to kill every young person and take their daughters for themselves. They didn't have to do that.
Okay,
they could have assimilated these people into their tribes. They could have done a great many of things. They could have subjugated the tribe.
What would typically happen when they did that?
They could have done all kinds of things.
What would typically happen when they did that?
And your position on God's morality is that makes it moral. And we see the horrendousness of your beliefs here. Because some survived, it makes it okay. It's like saying in the racial cleansing of the East, if some Bosnians managed to survive, then it wasn't an attempt at genocide, it was actually fine, which is just horrendous. Your position that if God commands it, it makes it moral, we have no evidence that God commanded anything. There is a lot of evidence that the Israelites benefited greatly from destroying these people and taking their land. But we don't have any evidence that any God commanded it. And if God did command it, then God could command the same thing with the Jews today, and it would make it moral in your position, which is monstrous.
No, he couldn't. No.
Well, how do you know? How do you know that the Nazis weren't commanded by God to do what they did?
Because there's no biblical support for it. There's no biblical command or justification for the Nazis doing. And plus, the idea that God would command the Christians to wipe out his people is frankly just laughable. I mean,
well, actually, the Catholic Church held that the Jews were responsible for what happened to Jesus all the way up until the Second Vatican Conference. That happened in the 60s. No, the Vatican is what I'm talking about, because the Germans were mostly Catholic.
Vatican I and Vatican II are not only non-Christian, they're actually, I believe, anti-Christ. Here's the thing. So
you still believe the Jews are responsible for what happened to Jesus?
Well, technically the Romans, really. I mean, you can put some of it onto the Jews, that's fine. But
well, that was the Vatican's position. That was the Vatican's position. It doesn't matter.
Well, so what? So what about the Vatican's position? The Vatican,
they believed that punishing the Jews was moral. So how do we know who has the universal morality?
Where did they get that from the scripture? Where did they get that from the scripture that they should punish the Jews?
I don't know.
They did.
I don't review.
They got it from pagan political inclinations. They didn't.
Well, they claim to get it from scripture because it's the Vatican. There's still some Catholics that believe.
Okay, what scripture did they use?
I don't know. A variety of them that blamed the
Catholic pagan
Jews
system
for handing in Jesus to the Romans.
Irrelevant.
I mean, the Romans basically, Pontius Pilate says he washes his hands of the whole ordeal. He wasn't to blame in the Vatican's response because he said, I'm not touching it. But the Jews were the ones that said, hey, you've got to punish and kill this guy. And that's what they were taking from.
This is all irrelevant. I don't care.
It is very relevant because you're claiming objective morality with absolutely no way to demonstrate it.
I can't.
And you're also claiming that if God commands something, you will do it happily, no matter what it is, who it harms, what implications it has. Him commanding it, or you think he's commanding it, automatically makes it moral. It's a problem.
The only commands for any type of military actions were solely to the Jews. There is nothing inside Christianity that is inside the New Testament of the commands to the Christians of the church under the new covenant to do anything of genocide, of takeover. In fact, quite the opposite. In fact, actually, Jesus and the apostles avoided at all costs taking any type of political authority or reign. Yet, the Catholic Church didn't. Now, why did they violate the example of Scripture and the example of the apostles and the instructions of Christ as to actually going and creating disciples of all nations, not going and taking over nations? So why is it that the Catholic Church diverged? Well, because they're a pagan entity at that point, Mark. They're not Christian. Okay, and you know I can prove it to you. A good, loving, just God would care if you go out and kill people to try and convert them or torture them to convert them to a faith. A loving God doesn't do that and doesn't command that and didn't command that of any Christian, nor is there any verse anywhere in Scripture that justifies any of the atrocious actions that the church did while it was under control and authority of governmental systems. None of that is justified in Scripture. None of that is inside New Testament statements to Christians as what they're supposed to do. The Inquisitions were expressly anti-biblical, shouldn't have even been done, and were generally fueled because of political pressures, particularly the Spanish Inquisitions because of political pressures. So this is not the type of thing you can simply put on Christianity, any more so than you would like me to point at a bunch of atheists that did horrible things and say that must be the byproduct of atheism. But bad people do bad things regardless of what they believe, Mark. And if you're willing to go kill people, I don't think you believe in a loving God that you're going to stand up to one day and face justice. In fact, I think you're more an atheist who doesn't believe you'll ever face up to a God that actually is going to hold you accountable to what you've done. But a true Christian will care about their actions in this earth, and they're not going to go against scriptural instruction and go and murder.
Okay, so first off, the pagan entity is such a no true Scotsman fallacy. You could frame it and put it on a wall. The Catholic Church are not Christians. It's such a ridiculous statement considering that they were there before any of the evangelical or other churches came along, and they are absolutely Christians. And saying, oh, they're not Christians because they don't act like Christians is a no true Scotsman fallacy. It absolutely is.
Okay, what's the definition of Christian?
Bad people do bad
Can we
things
address that
regardless
before you move
of.
on? Can we address
Well,
that?
I would just want to address your points. Bad people do bad things regardless of belief. Yeah, that's moral relativism. You've just proved more. Congratulations. Yeah,
it
absolutely.
Just because subjective agents does something doesn't negate whether or not there's an objective right or wrong.
So how do you demonstrate that it's objective, that your view of Christianity is objectively correct and the Catholic view of Christianity is objectively wrong? How do you do that?
Sure. Christianity has a definition. What is it?
It's people that believe that Christ was the... Well, that's my definition.
Well, it's the wrong definition. There's actually a true right definition.
Definitions are not prescriptive. They don't make things so. Definitions are simply usages of words.
Actually, Mark, there is a universal definition of Christianity shared by both seculars and Christians.
There might be a normative, but there's no universal definition.
What does Christian mean?
A believer in Christ.
What does the etymology mean?
Look, I really don't want to go into little definition and semantic games.
Here's your problem.
No, it's just games. It's just mucking around with words. For some person to say Catholics are not Christians is just a no true Scotsman fallacy, because Catholics are obviously Christians. They purport to be Christians. They live by the Bible. They believe in the God of the Bible. They believe in Christ is the God of the Bible. To say Catholics are not Christians is such an obvious falsehood.
Let's try again.
It just turns the sky blue.
Of Christian?
Somebody that believes that Christ was the risen God.
No.
Well, that's my definition. We can argue all you want.
It's the wrong
definitions aren't wrong. They describe usages of words. Look, I'm not here to. I'm not here to school you on basic English.
Okay, just let me respond then. You're not going to be honest, so let me respond.
I'm being very honest.
The definition of Christian shared by both secularism as well as Christianity and theology is one who follows Christ. It even comes from the actual etymology of the word Christ-like, Christian. One who follows the teachings of Christ.
That's fine for definition. I'm fine with that.
Excuse me, I'm not done. There's also a definition of a
Scotsman. I'm fine with that.
There's also a definition of a Scotsman, a man who is from Scotland. Okay? So if someone comes along and says no true Scotsman, and there's a definition of a Scotsman, it all depends whether or not they appeal to the definition of what is a Scotsman. Now, the definition of a Christian is one who follows the teachings of Christ. So,
which Catholics do.
Point to me the teachings of Christ that the Catholics were following when they were doing the genocides of the Inquisitions and the
so they were Catholics as long as they weren't doing bad things.
No, they were always Catholics. I'm saying they weren't Christians.
They weren't Christians.
If they were not adhering to the actual definition of what a Christian is, then they weren't Christians. It has nothing to do with no true Scotsman. There's a definition of a Scotsman, and there's a definition of a Christian. And if that person is not appealing to that definition, just like a Scotsman, a Japanese person is not a Scotsman. And you can't say no true Scotsman fallacy.
Listen to this. They got up in the morning. They were Christian. They did their morning prayers. They were Christian. They went outside. They enjoyed the air. They were Christian. They murdered somebody because of their religious beliefs. Suddenly they're not Christian anymore. They're not Christian. Then when they come back and they say, hey, that was really wrong. I should atone for that because I wasn't being Christian. Suddenly they're Christian again, even though they've been Catholic the entire way through. That is one of the most ridiculous things I have ever heard in my life.
I agree. That's why I didn't say that. You're being pedantic and dumb about that statement. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah, if we could just stop people throwing insults at children, I'd really appreciate it, Praise.
Well, Mark, you know what, dude? You're being really dishonest with me at this point.
I'm not. This is my honest opinion. You're saying that Catholics, the original structure that was formed out of Rome in Christianity and the foundational originator of Protestants and evangelicals, the original place it came from, are not, in fact, Christian, despite them saying we are 100% Christian and the origin of Christian faith.
Mark, when did the church split the first time?
I don't know. Why don't you enlighten me?
1050. Now, at 1050, this is about 400 years or so
Look,
after the
I'm
rise
not.
of Charlemagne.
I'm like just to stop. I am not getting
Hold on,
into
guys. Hold on.
whether you decide who is Christian and who is not
Right, but
Christian.
let me just
It's
The
show you
world
really quick. Hold
sees
up,
Catholics as
guys.
Christian, and that's just tough.
They're just
Deal
not.
with it.
They just
It
weren't.
is.
If they didn't live a
Oh,
Christian life
Catholics
Hold
are
up,
not
guys.
or
Christian.
follow a
I
Christian
think Catholics
definition, they
would
weren't Christian.
Hold
Catholics
up,
would
guys. We gotta
100%
start
disagree
muting
with
you
you.
guys. So we
This
got to
is
circle back
ridiculous.
to the debate title. Does morality point to God? So we can get off these
Sure.
irrelevant points right now. Go back to the main
Yeah,
issue.
I
That'd
agree.
be great.
I agree.
Okay.
So my question was, how do you demonstrate that your morality is objective while somebody else's, the Catholics one, is not? Or another person in your congregation who disagrees with you on morality, how do you demonstrate that you have the right one and they have the wrong one?
Well, it would be, first of all, biblically backed if I'm arguing with a Christian. Second of all, it would be based upon a conclusionary ethics. So as in, there are certain things that Christianity presents that lead to a high moral good. In fact, even from a secular humanist perspective. A high level of well-being that is based upon provoking and inspiring generosity, supererogatory acts, benevolence. These things that secular humanism really has no structure to encourage. They can be a part of it, but there's really no good justification for people to have it or to follow it or to be benevolent. In fact, it's generally good to look out for yourself so that then you can look out for others. Selfishness is always the first core point generally of secular humanism. Go ahead.
No, selfishness is not the first thing. I spelled it out. I won't go through it again, but that's absolutely not true. It's not selfishness. It is simply a well-being of yourself and society sometimes outweighs yourself. So that's demonstrably not true.
Well, but if you're relying on
you said
empathy,
it was biblically backed. I'll just finish addressing your points. Just because something is biblically backed doesn't mean that two people will agree on it. You've still got the same problem if someone says, "Hey, objectively, my view is biblically backed," and the other person says that my view is biblically backed. You still don't have agreement there, and that's your problem. You think it solves stuff from saying, "Oh, mine says this in the Bible." The problem is if they say, "Hey, it says supports my view in the Bible," you've solved nothing. Conclusionary ethics, high moral good, and high level of generosity, and it's basically, you even mentioned well-being in that as a conclusion, which is consequentialism, which is a secular moral system. So I don't see why you need a God or it comes from God, because you can do that with God.
If the moral standards have a consequence that tend to lead to higher good, it's not just purely consequentialism. I mean, it may have a consequential component to it in terms of a justification, but that's fine. I mean, there's no general form of ethics that excludes that. How do you know whether or not a moral dilemma hasn't been aired on the side of right or wrong, other than the conclusion that you would glean from it?
Yeah, I agree.
So then clearly, in Christianity has an objective set of standard moral norms that one is supposed to push you to the highest good. And this is established not only in the Ten Commandments, but the instructions of the apostles as well as Christ himself. Again, flowing back to this benevolence, supererogatory acts, generosity, self-sacrifice. These things are not only enforced or encouraged in Christianity, I should say, but I don't see any other way that a secularist could synthesize a justification for that, really.
Well, the problem is that your highest good metric includes anything that God determines to be good or God commands, it instantly becoming a good act.
No,
so
that's
that includes anything such as slaughtering of peoples, killing doctors. Any of these things can instantly become good as long as it basically is determined to be. Well, you said yourself that commands are good because the nature of God is good. So anything that God commands is by definition good.
Yeah, but you're taking it from a realm backwards ontologically to be divine command theory. Well, it does matter because one is about God. Well, it is. It's two completely different points, Mark. One is
if the command isn't good, then what is the reason why it's good?
Okay, listen to me. Again, you just keep cutting me off. Okay, if God commands it because it's good is different than God God making it good by commanding it. These are two different things. I'm saying that goodness, through divine simplicity, goodness is the essence of God. So that which flows from him is necessarily good. It's not that he can command whatever he wants, and by nature of him commanding it is good. That's divine command theory, which actually, honestly, you actually have a little bit of in your framework if you believe that morality is based upon consent. And you can giggle if you want, but
That's right. It just sounds funny.
You did you not state that morality can be judged objectively based upon consensus?
No. I said that it.
Well, if two people agree, that becomes moral.
Well, I said it was objective in reference to that framework. So it's a reference-based position. So outside of that framework, you cannot objectively judge.
Sure. So two people agree and one person disagrees. So the majority would still rule that, right?
Well, presumably, if that person was a member of their society, then yes.
Well, it's just
if
a different
they're not a
version
member of their society, they yeah.
Well, it's just a different version of command theory, and then the majority rules. The majority dictates morality.
Yeah, but that's the divine part that I was laughing at, not.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Yeah, sure. No, well,
because
I mean,
where's the God in all of that? There's no
I don't
God
know.
there.
I think atheists make themselves God in that regard, but sure. Yeah, no, I know what you mean.
Really?
Sure.
Wow.
Sure.
Well, I think you're a little.
No, but I mean, even the idea of consensus or a majority being able to dictate morality doesn't necessarily mean that they're gleaning to any objective standard.
Correct,
but just that based upon their own subjective justification, they agree that this is moral. It's not objectively moral.
Well, do you have people like Sam Harris that sort of go, well, because biologically we have empathy and reciprocity and some biological functions, and that makes an objective? I don't necessarily hold to that. I don't think that's true. I think that we have these feelings as a part of our survival mechanisms, but I don't think these feelings make a moral system in and of themselves. Sam Harris would disagree. I think he's wrong. I think that it requires more to have a moral system, but I think those are tools that can be used to discuss what a subjective moral framework should be according to well-being. But I just want to touch on that which flows from God is good. It's exactly the same thing. It's that if something flows from God to kill people, then it is good by definition. You're still in the same problem, and you still haven't demonstrated to any degree that morality comes from God.
Can you rephrase it? Instead of saying it is good, can you just say it's the least bad? And then reiterate your argument.
Why would killing people be the least bad?
I've just been over this now 3 or 4 times with you. What you're doing is you're going into scripture to find instances of moral dilemmas. Now I've asked you 3 separate times to tell me what should have been done with these people, and all you do is tell me what shouldn't have been done. Okay?
No. I said they could have captured them and reintegrated them into their society.
Beautiful. Okay, let's go with that.
And sort of taught them a better moral system to be under without killing them, their children, their animal. I mean, why kill the animals?
Let's go with that. What tended to happen in cultures that would do that would have war with other neighboring tribes or the like, and then would ingratiate the people that they conquered into their culture? What would generally historically be the byproduct of that?
You would have 2 tribes sharing ideas and building a
cultural collapse
system.
and cultural collapse, and then generally
right. So
people that were taken over,
cultural collapse.
The people that had taken over would. Well, I'm just telling you, this is your head's in the clouds on this one. What would generally happen is that those people would then, who were subjugated, who were then brought in and put in that kind of servant class position of having been taken over militarily, would eventually rebel. Would gather together and rebel, as well as drag in their perverse, disgusting, sadistic cultural norms into the culture that was trying to free them from that. Sometimes death is a mercy. Mark, you agree to this. If someone is in pain, if someone has the outlook of just a horrendous existence left up to them, sometimes death is better. I think you would agree with that. No,
not for simply having moral disagreements do I prescribe death.
no, not moral
That
disagreement.
is
No.
that
I'm
is
talking about
horrendous
no.
thing. So
I'm
they
not talking about moral
killed
disagreement.
all the
Stop straw
children,
manning me. Don't
including
straw
all
man
of the
me.
babies. So they killed all of the male children, including the babies. Now you say this is war poetry, which is convenient to say the
Some
least.
of it. Some of it is. Some of it
but
might be literalistic.
Let's take it at face value that they killed all of the little boys and took all of the little girls for themselves to be made into slaves, kind of thing. Do I think there would be a better way than doing that? Yeah, they could have taken, say, the babies, the young male babies, instead of putting them to the sword. I
And
think
who would
they
take
could
care
have,
of all those male babies? Who would take care of them?
well, the people of that nation.
So a struggling culture that's not fit, and that doesn't have all the infrastructure and resources.
So
they can't go to the
it's moral
supermarket
to
and get
kill.
formula or anything. They're
It's
just
moral
supposed to
kill
take
babies
on.
now.
Well, I'm saying that in some instances there might not be the highest or best other optional good. Is that what you open the door to by going the other way in the moral dilemma, no matter how you paint it, is worse?
Sorry, I think
because like you make it like it has to be
statements.
universally good in order to be commanded.
I
And I'm
think
saying
you're-
it can be the best available good for what is a difficult situation. That's what I'm saying. And Christians judge this too.
Yeah.
Christians judge this based upon the fact that Christ himself in Matthew 24 criticized the Jews because they were focusing on the letter of the law and using that as a justification to get rid of the weightier measures of the law, which were justice, mercy, and faith. And these are the things that were supposed to be inspired by the law. So there is a weightier measure of the law. This is how we judge moral dilemmas, Mark. It's because we do have an objective moral standard to glean to know where to land on moral dilemmas. That's what helps us.
So what Smokey's doing here is he's creating one end of the moral dilemma out of his head. He's basically going, if they did anything different, it would have collapsed, it would have been horrible, they wouldn't be able to take care of them. All of these catastrophic situations that he has no idea would happen or not.
Neither
but
do
he's
you.
Creating it right out of his head because he's like, what would be a better way? And today's modern society, we have better ways. It's why we have made illegal genocide that Smokey's currently advocating for some reason.
We'll take it out of the modern
and where
society.
we are now looking at, oh well, there could have been a better way, but Smokey can't have that happen because he has to believe that God did the best thing at all time, and it wasn't just a bunch of tribes running around making do with the moral systems that they had. So he is inventing alternatives straight out of his head to say, hey, it would have been the worst thing for everybody concerned if anything different happened. So it's just a creation of his own fantasy that there was no better way than killing every man, every child, every baby, except for the female ones that you take back to your tribe. And that, according to Smokey, is moral.
You think it's moral too? If
No,
yeah, of course, sure.
You
base your morality, you admit, is subjective.
Well,
so
I don't think that's the best way for well-being is to slaughter people. I don't think.
But that's
so.
Your
that's just
perspective.
Sort of your projection.
Hold on. But that's your perspective from your modern culture, which you claim is relativistic. So if you lived in that culture back then, you would have a different framework of relativistic morals that you justify are just as valid as the morals that you view today.
Yeah, and I think that
so
those people living back in there thought that it was moral, but in my framework that I know from what I prioritize, I think it is immoral. And from the advantage of having so much experience over the years and years and years, we can say that some of the things, because they would probably agree that their well-being and the well-being of their society is important too. They would probably agree. They just don't have enough knowledge to understand why what they're doing harms themselves, harms their society, and makes a really bad societal structure. They don't understand that.
You're assuming.
I would assume that they would prioritize their own. So you think that these people in tribes stayed together, but they don't care about their own well-being, and they don't care about the well-being of the tribe around them. Is that seriously what you're saying?
I would like you to not ask me a question to step over what I've been trying to get at here. You're running roughshod over what I'm trying to say because I think you're stuck here. You can't say they're immoral. You can't, from your own framework. You can't say that anything they were doing from their cultural. But Mark, you validate your own morals from your own cultural framework that you say are just as valid, even though they're subjective inside your culture, which means their moral framework from their subjective framework from your system is just as valid as yours.
Yeah. So from their perspective, they're being moral. From my perspective, they're not being moral.
Well, but that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter because from your perspective, what's moral is moral to you, and what's from their perspective is what was moral to them. So if it's valid for you, then it's valid for them. You saying they're immoral would be just the same as them saying you're immoral, which they probably.
But you can, if they can agree that their well-being is important and that of their tribe is important, I can make objective, moral imperatives that would improve their well-being and improve their society's well-being.
Not without seeing the future.
Well, nobody can see the future.
Well, I know, that's just why you can't make that claim that you could go back and tell them what to do different.
Of course I can, because there are designations we can make that will improve well-being objectively. If I give you, if I don't give you vitamin C and you have no access to fruit, that is objectively bad for your well-being, because the human can't generate vitamin C. You will get sick, get scurvy, and die. That is just fact. And there's nothing you can do to say that's subjective. If I give you vitamin C in that instance where you can't have access to fruit, it is objectively good for your well-being.
So we're going to probably conclude this in about 10 minutes. I'll let you guys finish out in 10 minutes, and we'll head into the concluding remarks.
Well-being isn't an objective value to everyone.
I never said it was.
Well, then it's worthless. It's worthless as a moral paradigm. Absolutely, it is. No, it doesn't.
Every single human being thinks that their well-being is important and the well-being of their society is important.
No,
the reason why that is because of empathy and reciprocity. As I went through, I've been through this again and again, and I'm not sure what you can't grasp of my position, but you still keep misrepresenting it. It just because most people, or nearly every single person, considers well-being to be important, doesn't mean that it's objectively important. It just is a fact that most people do. And I'm saying that is subjective, whether they consider well-being important. But it just so happens that we do.
Are you done?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So again, completely irrelevant. 100% completely, absolutely irrelevant. This is, because it has no value attached to it, Mark. It is nihilistic. You're making a judgment against.
How is it nihilistic?
Because it has no actual objective value.
I never claimed to have objective metaethics. What are you talking about?
Well, you are if you're saying that you could have instructed ancient cultures to live better from your cultural framework.
Yes.
Even though you're not living back then, you don't have availability of the same resources, you don't have omniscience, you can't see what your decisions or instructions to them would have ultimately led to. This is all just assumption, and you're assuming that you can force your modern, and it is very ethnocentric, you can focus your modern moral perspective, which you admit is subjective, on their subjective moral standard. You have no legs to stand on to call them immoral at all, because it's based upon the same paradigm that you actually validate and say it's the paradigm I choose morality on, which is the same paradigm they choose morality on.
I understand that morality is a social construct. So from my point of view, they're immoral. From their point of view, they're not. And that's the way society always works. I think that slavery, for instance, is immoral from my point of view, but the Israelites didn't know any better.
You're fine with slavery.
You're now telling me what I think about slavery. Oh, this is hilarious. What do I think about slavery?
Oh, you're a slavery supporter. Absolutely.
Oh, really? How do you figure that?
How many of the components of your electronics that you're using to participate in the stream this evening were made in slave cultures, modern slave cultures? China, India, Pakistan.
So you're basically going to sort of extend the thing of slavery to,
Well, we haven't
underpaid
abolished
workers.
slavery yet today, even though the UN
Wow.
has charters against it, but they haven't
So,
abolished
so
it.
here we go. Here we go from this one. We go from maybe people who are working for minimum, incredibly low wage.
Couldn't you
in
be
China
morally
and stuff,
consistent?
to people that are employed for minimum wage in America?
No.
They're wage slaves too. They're all wage slaves. Slavery is going to be extended to mean absolutely
I'm glad we're
anything
talking slavery
because
at the end. I'm glad we're talking slavery at the end. No, what are the five?
Well, you're the one that brought it up. You said that I believe in slavery, and I am 100% against slavery. And by the way, for your information, I am against these people being paid such a low amount.
Throw your computer away and stop participating in streams if you're really against slavery.
Well, and no, you're wrong. Are you against slavery? Are you against slavery?
No, actually, I think slavery is perfect.
No, you think slavery is great. Sure, the morality of the Christian person, slavery.
Well, you think slavery is fine too. You're just a hypocrite
you heard
about
it first, Mark. Yeah.
Mark, you're just a hypocrite.
I don't think that slavery.
You support slavery. You support slavery every time you buy an iPhone or a smartphone or a computer or a piece of electronics. In fact, probably most of what you're surrounded by in your house. Most of what's in your house.
I think you're using rhetoric to sort of say that people being paid to make cheap electronics are slaves. They do it voluntarily.
No.
I'm not saying it's good. I don't think it's a good thing that they get minimum wage. But I think you're just engaging in rhetoric to sort of go, well, you support slavery because you've bought electronics that people have been paid a small amount to make in underdeveloped countries, which is not great.
No, they're actually
but there's nothing I can do about that.
No. They're actually slaves. They're not just paying
here we go.
Okay, what
can you demonstrate that they're slaves and they're against they are doing this against their will? Can you
Mark, you're tragically uneducated.
Can you demonstrate that is the case? Please go for it.
What are the top 3 slave nations in the world right now?
Well, I'd presume I honestly don't know.
China, India, and Saudi Arabia. Okay.
Well, that doesn't mean that everybody working there is a slave, Smokey. And I agree that the conditions are not great and there should be better.
Okay. Mark?
Yeah, so now we're back to definitional.
Are you going to let me finish a statement? Or are you just really embarrassed right now being a slaveholder? You're a slave participant. You're a participant in slave ownership.
Oh, no, tell me more about slavery.
If you were morally consistent, you would just have a very inconvenient life where you would specifically avoid purchasing any products that happen to come from slave nations like China, like India,
so
like
this
Saudi
is
Arabia.
Definitional tap dancing to basically say anybody employed by these nations are slaves. They're all slaves. They don't do it voluntarily. They just get captured, thrown into shackles, and forced to make electronics for a wage.
Mark,
that's the definition of slavery now.
Mark,
which is hilarious because you could extend that definition to, and I mean, I've heard people say it, that anybody that collects a wage is a slave. And it's just
I'm not saying
rhetorical.
That. I'm saying these are actual
to say you support slavery because you buy stuff that people have been paid underpaid wages for.
Not underpaid.
It's simply semantics and dishonesty is what it is.
No actual slaves, Mark. You can't run from it, Mark. You can't run from it.
I'm not running from anything. I don't support that these people are paid. And this is where it gets bogged down because Smokey will say something.
You are desperate to just not let me talk at this point. You are so screwed in this argument.
You were having your little rant about slavery before I didn't interrupt you. So,
Mark, you're a slave owner. Okay. Now I'm okay with the idea that the world can't function without.
You're a moral monster.
That the reason then you have to call the UN moral monsters too, because there's a reason.
Really, you're up there with the UN. Yeah, I'm sure.
Well, you would have to call the UN moral monsters because they have charters against slavery.
So listen,
fighting. Can I finish? Can I finish?
Can I finish, Mark? The Freedom Caucus says about slavery. Listen to Smokey about slavery.
We'll come back to you. Come on. All right, there we go.
I would like you to just not overtalk me for 10 seconds, Mark, because you're losing here in this argument. Okay, you can't justify yourself. You're a raging immoral hypocrite. Okay, these nations thrive off of slave labor. It's part of why they're so wealthy. Okay, now the UN does not force their member nations, these member nations, to cease slavery. They've been trying for the better part of 2 decades. The reason they can't, because they don't have an infrastructure for it. Okay? And what would happen by outlawing slavery in these regions would actually lead to something more monstrous. And even the UN knows this, that in helping the countries have regulated slave trades until they have better commercial and industries to appeal to and better infrastructure, that it's better to support them in trying to get rid of slavery slowly by ingratiating them into a different culture instead of just outlawing it. Because then what happens, you have a black market slave trade, which is far more monstrous than anything that's currently in many of the regulated cultures. So no, slavery is not immoral. Slavery has existed all over. How you treat the slaves, that's where morality comes into play. That's the issue. And this is your issue here, is you want to think of slavery as a universal immorality. And it just isn't. And you're a hypocrite because you participate in it. You could have an inconvenient life where you participate in no slave-made items at all, but you don't. You enjoy the benefits of not paying $18,000 for your smartphone. And just because some people get paid in those countries does not negate the fact that this is a country that propagates and uses slave labor. So your point is moot.
Okay, so Smokey's just mad because he can't address arguments. Look, you sit there and say, "Oh, you're losing" and stuff. Nobody who's winning has to sit there and try to convince others that they're winning. It's quite frankly a little bit pathetic. With this idea of slavery is people getting paid, underpaid, extremely underpaid, in horrible conditions in third world countries. I don't support that. As far as I know, all my electronics were made in factories with paid workers. As far as I know. Now, can I source that out and find every single circumstance where maybe slave labor was involved? No. But we see the absolute immorality from Smokey here. He supports slavery. He does support slavery. I'm against it. I will speak up against it. But he supports it. This is where the Christian morality gets you to. This is where religious morality will get you to. With Smokey going, I support slavery. And it's on tape now. It's off on the internet. So have fun with that soundbite. And calling me a hypocrite when he's basically pointing a finger and going, you support slavery, when he's already said that he actually supports slavery, isn't that
I'm not a hypocrite. No, I'm not a hypocrite. I'm consistent. I'm consistent.
No, because you're pointing at me and saying, how dare you support slavery? And then you should throw your computer away and then saying... Yeah, I'm
not hypocritical.
Don't you support slavery as well?
Yes, I do, and I'm okay with that.
So therefore, you're being hypocritical in accusing me and deriding me for supporting slavery. That is a hypocritical statement because you do it as well.
Okay, no, Mark.
According to your warped perspective.
Mark, okay, wow, that is officially the dumbest thing I've heard all week. And don't listen to the
UN about slavery. So
here's why that doesn't work.
Smokey knows what slavery is, and it's just your perspective is I know what slavery is.
We're going to be concluding here in a second to let you guys know that. So just going to have two more comments, and then we're going to go into.
Yeah, here's why that doesn't work.
You're so deluded. You think you know what slavery is better than every single expert on earth, and I admit there is still slavery in the world, but not to my knowledge has any of my electronics been made by slave labor. Maybe underpaid people in China, sure, but not slave labor. And that's where you're completely wrong. And you're just like a dog with a bone. You just can't leave this alone.
If someone is classified as a slave, a modern slave, are they paid a wage?
Depends.
No, actually, no. The answer to that is no.
Well, I said it depends. Yeah, no, I don't care about your answer. If you ask me a question, I'm going to answer it. It depends.
On what?
They can do jobs for certain things, like I can do a job in exchange for room and board. A wage might not necessarily be involved, but it depends on whether you are voluntarily doing it or you have been unwillingly coerced and forced into that position.
So if you willingly sell yourself, then you're fine.
I didn't say that.
Well, it sounded like that's what you. So
no. Your question wasn't whether you sold yourself. The question was for wages. Be specific because you asked about wages.
Okay, I'm confused here.
Wages is ongoing remuneration for your labor. Okay,
and you
that's
can be a
totally
slave.
different. That's totally different than basically saying, "Oh, well, you've sold yourself." No, that's a once-off remuneration that is not the same as a wage. You
Okay,
need to
but
get your terminology right.
you were talking about wages. Then you changed it to whether or not they did it willingly or unwillingly.
Correct.
So what is okay? So here's, as of 2018, the countries with thanks for sharing my screen. As of 2018, the countries with the most slaves were India, 8 million, China, 3.86 million, Pakistan, 3.19 million.
And how many people live in China? How many people live in China?
Quite a lot. I think, what is it? 500 million, a billion, something like that.
I think it's more a billion.
Billion?
Yes.
So yeah.
So that's a very, very low percentage of the workers in China, correct?
Sure. It's still a slave economy.
How can you say that my electronics were made by slaves if it's such a low percentage?
Because
how do you know
it
that's
came
the case?
from a slave economy. I don't know why this is so hard for you to grasp, Mark. Like it's like, oh, they're not 100% slaves, so it's okay.
Yeah, but they're not even 0.0. Look, and I don't agree with that. I condemn in the most heartily China's use of slaves. Right, I condemn it. I think it's
buy from them.
So
let me just finish.
I just condemn it, and you're saying no, that didn't happen. What the hell? No, seriously, you're hilarious.
Please let us finish this just real quick. Just let me try and wrap this up with them real quick about this.
So, this guy's hilarious.
You can say that, Mark, but again, this is how you're hypocritical, but I'm not. And you trying to throw it on me just shows how desperate you are. I'm consistent. I don't think that slavery is necessarily immoral. It matters how you treat the slaves. That's what matters. That's what matters. How morality is directed at each other. Okay. You, however, think that slavery is universally wrong in every single context, yet you participate in it. See, I'm not the hypocrite. You are. I'm being consistent with my morality that it's not that slavery is wrong. It's how you treat other people as to whether or not it is wrong. You, however, sit here and say slavery is wrong. I don't support it, while you are actively supporting it. So it just doesn't work. Sorry.
No, see, the thing is that I don't support the slavery, but to the best of my knowledge, I haven't used slavery. And just because it exists in China doesn't mean it's a slave economy. If it's like 0.03% of the population, then you cannot say that it's a slave economy. That's just ridiculous. Now, this whole thing about I'm not a hypocrite, you're not a hypocrite, but you've just sat there and said, I agree with slavery as long as you treat the slaves right. I'm sure that, there's a lot of horrified African American people in the audience or that will watch this, and you've just revealed what a moral monster you are. And
I don't support antebellum slavery.
I will use this. Can I? You complained about me interrupting, and you're doing the same thing through the entire way. I just want to finish.
Let you finish here. We're going to hand out to Smokey, and then that'll end the debate. Then we'll get into the concluding remarks. Go ahead, Smokey.
Yeah, so Smokey's really confused that when I say I condemn slavery, he says, no, you don't. It's basically you're just not in reality at that point. I condemn slavery. I condemn it. I condemn it in China. I condemn it in India. I condemn it in all of these places. They should be paying a fair wage to these workers, or at least a wage that is comparable with the other workers around them. They should not be employing slave labor, but that doesn't mean that I somehow endorse slavery, and I don't know how he gets that from what I've been saying. Do I have control to go into China and stop them doing it? No, I don't. That's beyond my power. I support the UN doing everything it can, but it's just beyond my power. But his idea that, all your stuff was made by slaves, he doesn't know that. He's got no idea that happened. He's just saying it because he wants it to be true, like most of the fantasy that Smokey's engaged in. And that just shows what a moral monster he is. He's fine to enslave you, as long as he treats you well. How immoral is that? He will buy you from somebody as long as he treats you well. You've got to do everything he says. Immorality from Christianity, and this is the guy arguing of the morality of Christianity. Someone who's fine to enslave you. You just think about that.
So I'll just respond to that real quick, and I guess we can conclude.
I thought we were wrapping up.
That will
I
end
thought we
it.
were wrapping up.
Yeah, this is Smokey's going to wrap up here. Then we're going to concluding remarks. We'll start off with you, Mark, for the first concluding remark, and then Smokey. Go ahead, Smokey.
Yeah, you could stop buying things from nations that keep slaves. It's really that simple. I mean, you could. If you were morally consistent, that's exactly what you do. You'd be a little more uncomfortable, but you at least be able to actually sit there and be able to be morally consistent, which you can't be because you do participate, you do enjoy it. So because they keep slaves, they do keep slaves. It's a slave nation. It still has slave laws. It still actually forces people into slave labor. It does that, and you participate in that. You just do. That nation does that and has laws and instructions to do that, and you support that nation by buying things from them. You could do otherwise. You'd have probably a pretty inconvenient and uncomfortable life, but you could do it if you wanted to be morally consistent, but you don't. I would never force anyone to slavery, and this is the thing that Mark has done for the slavery debate, is assume that it's always forced, and it isn't. It isn't in the Jews' case. People sold themselves. In those instances, Jews actually, if they were found owning someone that was kidnapped, were supposed to be killed. So there was nothing in the ancient Jewish culture about forced slavery unless it was a product of a war crime or something of the like, or a vassal nation, which is a completely different argument altogether. But otherwise, when they were purchasing them from other nations, they were entering into agreed upon contracts, not purchasing from slave owners that kidnap people. That was atrocious to the Jews. So I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't force anyone to slavery. So that just shows how desperate Mark is to try and make a point, to try and make it sound like that I would force people into slavery when that's not even a biblical precedent. So I'll yield. Mark can have his final words, and I guess we'll wrap this up.
Very good, guys. Very good.
I'll just touch on that quickly.
Well, this will be your concluding remark.
Okay, I'll include it in my conclusion.
Okay,
no
go ahead, man.
I thought that was Smokey's conclusion. No, that wasn't Smokey's conclusion. He just
that was just the response to that thing. Yeah, that thing you just said. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you just allowed it. Okay, all right. So just first quickly on my conclusion, we haven't heard from Smokey how we differentiate these objective moral systems from one another. There's thousands and thousands of these in the world, and they all claim to have the objective moral system. And I press Smokey again and again. How do we tell? Well, it's Scripture. What if people disagree on Scripture? Oh, well, it's the act itself. Or what if they disagree on the outcome of the act? He's got no objective standard that he can demonstrate is actually a universal. He just claims it. And all that you do is just have thousands of people all claiming that they have an objective moral standard when they don't. Just to tie up what Smokey was saying there, kidnapping, it wasn't slavery. Slavery was slavery. Kidnapping was stealing a free person, not a slave. Although it was illegal to kidnap a slave because that's somebody's property. The Bible also says, take your slaves from the lands around you. It was involuntary. If you were an outsider, they could take you as a slave against your will. In fact, if you were a father, you could sell your daughter into slavery, regardless of whether she wanted it or not, because women wasn't considered to have any kind of opinion. You could just sell your daughter as a slave. That's morality according to Smokey. You can just sell your daughter. Really moral. But also the youth and fro wasn't really answered either. Smokey basically pushed back against the idea of, if morals flow from God, then anything God designates, including the slaughter of peoples, is automatically moral. He couldn't answer how he knew that Nazis or these people who were religious that did awful things were not acting from God. All he could say is, well, they're not acting from my interpretation of what Christianity is. And to say that Catholics aren't Christian is one of the funniest things I've ever heard. It's so ridiculous, and it is a no true Scotsman fallacy. And why aren't they Christian? Because they're not doing what I think Christianity should be, which, according to Smokey, is just his subjective interpretation. He's not God to say, hey, this is Christian and this is not. And in the past, God has commanded the slaughter of people. So is that Christian or is it not Christian? It's up to debate. It's up for speculation. It's up for subjective interpretation. And Smokey in no way has told us any way to objectively know what's universal. All it is subjective interpretation of people. He interprets that this is good. Another Christian interprets that it's bad. How do we tell the difference? Silence. Crickets from Smokey. It's just, well, I look at the scripture. They look at the scripture. I think that it accords with these acts of God. They think it accords with these acts of God. There is silence to how we definitively determine who is right and who is wrong. And everybody's is absolutely sure that they've got the universal moral stance on this. I don't. I think morals are social constructs that we use to determine how to treat each other. And they do change from ancient times where we didn't know what we were doing was harmful to up till now. And it is harmful, I can say that. It's objectively harmful to these people. It objectively harms someone to enslave them against their will. It just does. And that's based upon a meta-ethical framework of, can we agree that well-being is important? Well-being of me and well-being of my society. If we can agree, then we do have the framework for objective moral imperatives. No God required at all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark. I think your concluding remark there. So we'll hand it on to Smokey for his concluding remark, and then we'll head into Q&As. Go ahead, Smokey.
Sure. Okay. Well, and again, to reiterate this, because this is one of the core stances that Mark was trying to appeal to, it does not matter if a subjective agent fails to apply objective morality. It doesn't discount it. And this is, again, pointing back to exactly why it is objectively moral. And I can point to objective morality that is instantiated in scriptures so that the Catholics were not operating morally. When I asked Mark to give me any biblical justification for what the Catholics were actually doing, he couldn't give me one. Because he's very ignorant about what Catholic history is actually even about, or where a lot of these commands or ideas actually came from. And they weren't originated from Scripture. They were originated from governmental officials that were put into a governmental system that the church had taken over at the time, which is what caused a lot of issues and splits over the years. Catholicism made a lot of errors following immediately after Charlemagne. I would have wanted to get there, but we didn't get the chance to, and Mark had cut me off before I got the chance to go down that road of exactly, again, why the Catholics aren't actually Christian when they violate Christianity. I mean, this is just simple logic. A Scotsman isn't a Scotsman if he doesn't fit the definition of a Scotsman. That's just the nature of the beast. And you're not dealing with a no Scotsman fallacy at that point, calling someone who isn't a Scotsman not a Scotsman. That's not a no Scotsman fallacy. That's just operating by definitions. Definition of a Christian is one that follows Christ. So when I asked Mark to show me what it was he thought that the Catholics were following in Scripture to cause them to do the things that they did that were seemingly very anti-Christian and anti-biblical, he couldn't point to it. He just said, well, they thought they were justified. They somehow got there. They somehow thought that they were right. Okay, well, based upon what? It wasn't Scripture. Because Scripture condemns what they did, and all of Christianity, certainly modern Christianity, recognizes that it was condemned. Even the Catholics, even these days, seem to recognize that that was condemned back then and is not part of biblical instruction and is an anti-biblical action, therefore non-Christian in its action. It's not a no true Scotsman fallacy. The Christian has a definition. A Christian is one who follows Christ. If you are violating that, going against that, betraying that, rebelling against that, well, you can't claim to be Christ-like or a follower of Christ. You violated the definition. The no true Scotsman fallacy just completely does not apply. If they didn't act from the command of God, then they weren't acting on behalf of God. That's how it was. And what was dictated to an ancient culture to take over and bring an end to what was generations of slaughter and bloodshed is just ridiculous to try and condemn those people who were basically attempting to be peacemakers and bring peace to the land. Mark completely misrepresents the nature of Hebrew slavery. And I've seen atheists do this. There is no verse in Scripture, even the one that Mark pointed to, that talks about where it is actually considered to be forced. Even in the instance of a daughter, again, this is one of those instances where a atheist is trying to leverage an ethnocentric, bigoted moral dilemma, because actually that was the best, highest hope for a girl born in one of these ancient cultures was to be either sold or married into a good household. The only other option would have been to rest with the family that they were in that could have been poor, or to be free of their own, not have a family to cling to, and then be free out there and have to be relying upon the welfare system and prone to marauders and rapists and thieves and everything else out there. The highest good that was seen by a woman back then, the thing that they would push for, that they wanted, and Mark is just saying, well, they should have wanted different. Well, that's bigotry. What they would have wanted is exactly what they did, and what they orchestrated in their culture was to pursue the highest, best good that was available to them at the time in their culture. And that was ingratiating yourself into households in servant positions or through marriage. That is simply what tended to lead people to have a better life. So that's what everyone was pushing for. To look back on that and say that those people pursuing what they wanted was immoral is immoral in and of itself, and extremely bigoted. There's nothing in scripture that shows that these people were forced or kidnapped. Mark is purely assuming all of that. When it says you can purchase them from neighboring nations, that in no way whatsoever insinuates that that was a forced purchase. But that actually could be considered, and with many scholars these days do recognize that there's no insinuation of actual force in that text at all, that those could be willful contracts. So that's just a lie. That's just an unscholarly, uneducated lie about the Jewish people, which would cause me to almost wonder if Mark is hiding a little bit of anti-Semitism, just looking for any available opportunity to hate on the Jews, despite the fact that his own moral system actually says that everything they did wasn't necessarily morally wrong at all. So it looks to me just like a desperate attempt to take the position that he would hold, that everyone's subjective moral justifications from their cultural level is therefore justified and perfectly moral for them, and then to turn that on its face and to go back and say that these other cultures who are justified by his moral framework are now unjustified by his moral framework. It's pure contradictory hypocrisy. And I hope the audience enjoyed the show. Again, atheism trying to construct morality is just like building houses on clouds. It has absolutely no substance. And the best thing they can usually do is to try and point to a moral dilemma that they themselves can't possibly ever solve. And so with that, I guess I'll yield. Thanks for the debate. It was a fun time.
All right, guys. Well, that concludes the debate. That was a passionate and zealous debate, and I hope the audience enjoyed it. But now we're heading to the Q&As, and we'll try to get to these pretty swiftly so we can get going with you guys. Have to get going here or whatever. So we'll start with Christian Carpenter, $1.49 super sticker. Thank you so much, brother. A pink ice cream cone. Thank you so much.
Good to see you, CC. Cone Club represent. Good to see you, bruv.
And Gavin Hurleyman, I haven't seen a super chat from him, but he didn't type anything for $5. Thank you so much, Gavin.
Thank you,
Gift lady. Hi, Gavin.
Hey, Gavin. So we'll go into now the questions. So how it normally works, whoever it's addressed to will get to finish the question. So that's how we normally do it. And every other channel does it, so we might as well do it here too. So it's addressed to you, Mark, from Servant of Christ. If I was able to slap you in the face and you believe that to be wrong, what gives you the right to say I'm wrong if morality is all relative?
Yeah, so society's moral structure is like, I hate to go through it again, is based upon sort of a general well-being of me and of that's my take on it, well-being of me and my society. So it's not just it applies to one person and people can have individual moralities. It's a social construct, so it applies to a society. Now, some moral systems, as Smokey pointed out, some moral systems are compatible with this, some are not compatible with this, but it's a better moral system than, well, my God told me to slap you in the face, so I'm going to do it because it's right.
Thank you so much, Mark. Do you want to respond to them, Smokey, or go to the next question?
Oh, you can go to the next one. That's fine. Sure.
Gavin Hurleyman for both. If atheism's mantra of maximizing well-being, why don't we see the majority of universities and colleges established by atheist organizations on a global basis?
Well, you've got to eliminate sort of atheist from secular. Atheist has no wish to establish anything besides maybe foundations on that premise. So the problem here is you're getting confused in thinking that atheism is some sort of worldview. It isn't. It's not designed to be. It's not supposed to be. All it is a position on one question. Do you believe in God? And atheists say no. That's all it is. It doesn't seek to do any of these things, but other systems do. Secular systems do. And secular is independent from religion, which atheists can be a part of, and we're all a part of. So sort of saying, well, atheism isn't doing this. Well, atheism isn't trying to.
Very good.
Sure.
Smokey, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, it's a good question, Gavin. And again, as I said, no matter which, and he says atheism isn't a worldview. Okay, fine, whatever. I think the worldview of no God is a worldview. And I think that things flow from that when you adopt that perspective. And some of those things, it can include even light or heavy nihilism. And atheism as a worldview, I guess that's up to a debate whether or not it's a worldview, but as a worldview, the way that I see it, tends to generally offer absolutely nothing. It tends to just seek to destroy everything else around it. It's basically a black hole. It offers nothing while trying to take everything away. So I'll yield to that.
Yeah, so this is just a straw man of atheism, really, and sort of to say, hey, it's comparable with nihilism, light or soft, or whatever you want to describe it as, is just straw manning at its finest. Logical fallacies from Smokey. We've all seen it, all heard it. So the worldview of no God, it's not a worldview; it's a position on one subject. It doesn't influence what I think of morality. It doesn't influence what I think of science. It doesn't influence what I think of spirits. It doesn't influence anything to do with my life besides that one position. And that's it. The theists often do this. They try to build out atheism to say, hey, it says this about evolution. It says this about morality, and it says this about this and this about that. And it's all just straw manning. It's all just in their minds. Atheism only is a position on one thing. Atheists differ on every single other subject associated with it. But, it's convenient for Smokey, so he straw mans away, as usual.
Yeah, I don't see how it's possibly a straw man.
Yeah, that was my response, mate. I got to end the question. Thank you.
Well, it was to both of us, but the question was to both of us.
No, it was actually to me, because it was like, why don't atheists create universities? Thanks, Smokey.
So even though, okay, all right.
It was Gavin's, it was to both, so that was, but we're going to end it there,
I'll let Mark have this one. It's fine. I'll let Mark have it.
Yeah. So we just got a $5 super chat from Crimson Air. Thank you so much, brother. Mark, can you give one specific example of any Gentile moral system that was up to par or superior to the ancient Israelites?
Any moral system that was up to par or superior to the ancient Israelites? Yes, nearly all of them. There's so much wrong that the ancient Israelites did, as far as how they treated the people around them, as far as how they treated their own members. Maybe he's talking about contemporary. Is he talking about contemporary?
Gentile. So I'm guessing.
I guess so. He means Roman and contemporary kind of stuff. No, I don't think any moral system was superior by today's standards. You could find things that were superior. For instance, the Egyptians had some superior as far as golden rule dictates were concerned. They used a positive instead of a negative. And you can find bits and pieces of superiority, but that doesn't necessarily make any one system superior over the others. As far as contemporary, the Israelites had a very well-defined good system. I'm not arguing with that, but that doesn't prove it was from God, and it doesn't make it superior to what we now can create as far as moral systems go. We don't live back then. We don't use that system anymore because it is outdated and terrible.
Go ahead, Smokey, if you want to respond to that.
Yeah, and again, how the subjective agents apply an objective moral is less important than the existence of the objective moral itself. And it looks like a lot of this has been based around the idea of looking at, in fact, it's almost kind of comical what Mark just said, because he's admitted that morality is purely subjective, and yet he's using his subjective morality to criticize the subjective morality of another while saying that subjective morality is the valid path to morality. There's no legs to his argument. It just doesn't matter. Even him saying, well, the Egyptians were superior. Well, in what way? Well, appealing to his subjective cultural more. And so he's saying they're subjectively superior, which means they're not really superior. It's just his preference and opinion that they're superior based upon his subjective framework, which he admits is subjective. And this, to me, just looks like Mark is basically admitting morals don't actually exist.
You want to start with that, Mark? It's
his question. It's your question, dude. You can.
Yeah. So as I've said, and I'll reiterate because obviously Smokey doesn't hear very well. There are foundations for that. Empathy and reciprocity. I'll say it again. Lead to compassion and empathy, and these are the tools we use to build moral frameworks. Now, I'm sure that the Israelites would think that they are doing the best for their people and the society that they live in. I could objectively demonstrate that is not so, because I can show that, enslaving people is bad and doing these things are bad, not just for the slaves, but also for the society. We see that in ancient Rome, where they enslaved everybody. They wiped out the middle class. It was terrible for the society, not just the slaves themselves. So, from my point of view, I can say this. But that's the whole point about moral relativity. And that's what we see in the world, is people just trying to do the best to implement systems that benefit them and the society around them. That's what morality is. Unfortunately, Smokey can't demonstrate that there's any actual universal morality. You just can't.
Gotcha. So Rebuke asks, where's the after show? Well, there will be one here on this channel. I'm not sure about other channels, but I will promote those. If anyone else has an after show, let's put it in the chat and I'll promote it. So you can
I'll come to yours for a bit, Praise. I'll come to yours for a bit. There's a few things I wanted to be able to add on at the end. Sure.
Awesome. So we'll go to the next question from M. Scotty for Mark. Why do you capitalize on religious wars, which only account for 7% of all wars, and misrepresent history to suit your argument? Simple question, I know.
Yeah, I don't misrepresent history, and I don't capitalize on religious wars. I think religious differences have caused a lot of harm in the past. Anybody that disagrees with that is obviously, completely fooling themselves and deluded. There's been a lot of religious schisms that have harmed people. There's been a lot of religious disagreements over, even facts. Even the heliocentric model had people killed for it. So please don't come and tell me that religious differences haven't caused harm, because that is demonstrably wrong. And I think you know that.
Here's the problem. Belief differences cause harm, period. He wants to isolate it to religion because that's part of the narrative, but it doesn't matter. Believing different things tends to lead to controversy, which can sometimes lead to conflict. And Scotty is right. If you look at it, Mark seems to just keep stepping over this. But it is true that the most wars are not caused because of religion. And just because people that were in these wars had a religion doesn't mean they were having a religious war. So lots of scholarship has been done on this, which Mark seems to want to ignore, to try and just lay it at the feet of religion in general. And I think that's a rough thing to try and pull. And I think it's unscholarly, and it's not actually backed by evidence.
Well, the whole point is that if there was universal moralities, then there wouldn't be these religious wars. It would be apparent to everybody. And since Smokey claims so much it's objective and you can just look to the text and look to these texts and just get morality from it, then why are we having so many people subjectively disagreeing over what objective morality is?
Because
he's ignoring the fact, excuse me, he's ignoring the fact that any religious wars disprove universal morality, and any disagreement disproves universal morality. And it's not just a little bit of disagreement. We have thousands and thousands and thousands of religions all disagreeing on an objective morality. We have people in the same religion disagreeing with what is objectively moral and saying they have the objective morality and the person in the pew next to them doesn't. It's not just that there's religious wars, it's the scope of disagreement, and no one can prove that they are right and the other person is wrong. And Smokey can't address this.
Yes, I can. Do you want me to or not?
No, you have given no way for people to determine.
Well, it's your final word, so you don't want me to address.
Yeah, that's my final word. You can't. You've given no way that they can designate if both say they're reading from the text, if both say they're following the will of God, if both say they're right, if both say that it flows from God and this is what God meant. There is no way to differentiate between the two.
That's not true. Can one of them
be right? That is true. That is 100% true.
All right. Let me ask you: Can one of them be right and one of them be wrong?
Can one of them be right and one of them be wrong? Yeah, that's possible. But how do you tell? How do you tell?
Exactly. How do you tell? The same way every subjective agent tells, by testing.
So it's subjective.
No. That way, no. Subjective agency does not get rid of objectivity. Okay, just because two subjective agents can disagree on an objective truth does not alter the objective truth. The objective truth still stands, even if a subjective agent misinterprets it or gets it wrong. That's why, as subjective agents, we put things to test.
But the objective truth may not exist. It may not be there at all. They both might be wrong.
But you assume that.
How do you tell? How do you tell?
The same way every subjective agent tells anything, by testing it to see which is valid and which is not. So if we have a disagreement, well, it depends. What worldviews are we talking about? God or non-God? Christian or non-Christian?
You and somebody else disagree on sex before marriage. Who is right?
Are they Christian or not?
Yeah, they're Christian. Does it matter?
Then I can point to scripture. Yeah, it matters, because then we are operating from the same moral paradigm that if I can point to scripture that this is wrong, then they should be adhering to that objective morality.
And just say they can point to another piece of scripture that they say, hey, this shows, if you interpret it like this, it shows that you can.
Where would that be, and how would that work?
I don't know. What if they say that? Who do we prove is right?
I've never heard someone say that. So
all we have here, and this is what Smokey can't address, all we have here is another argument from two religious people, both claiming that the scripture supports them, both claiming that they have the objective morality.
Yeah, and one can be wrong.
No way to determine who is actually right.
We're gonna wrap this up now. Yeah,
one can be wrong, Mark. How do you figure out if you're wrong about anything, dude?
You missed the point, dude.
How do you figure out if you're wrong about anything as a subjective agent? Dude, you're so dishonest about this. It's unbelievable.
Let's go to the next question. Come on, guys. Let's go to the next question. I know you're ridiculous.
He misses the point, Mike.
You are ridiculous, Mark. This is absurd. I mean, you know nothing about history. You misrepresent.
Yeah, could we stop with
you guys are ready to go at it. Let's go to the next one. Okay.
Could we stop with the personal attacks, please? It's very unbecoming, Smokey.
Right. Let's
because you've been above board the whole debate.
Oh, I probably haven't. I probably snuck in a few little things here and there. I apologize, but you could change your behavior and say,
no, I'll tell you what, you can shove your apology as well as your hypocrisy and just do us all a huge favor. How about that?
Wow.
All right,
really? Is that an objectively moral thing to say, or is that just you feeling?
We gotta get this
things?
going. We gotta stop. We gotta come on. So
this is fascinating.
I don't think it has a moral component necessarily.
All right, come on.
Really?
You being a clown doesn't necessarily have a moral component.
Let's conclude this.
Really?
Come on.
Yeah.
How very Christian of you. Yeah.
Come on, guys.
Oh, is there a Christian verse against it?
Well, I mean, wasn't there Peter 3:15?
About what?
About, explaining your faith with compassion and humility?
To absolutely everyone, all the time, universally?
Yeah, I'm sure calling people clowns.
I'm sure there's weightier measures of the law to consider. There, Mark?
We gotta wrap it up. Come on. All right, Mark, Reid, if you believe in evolution and there is no God, how can you trust your brain and your mind to determine what's good or bad?
Yeah, okay. So we're sort of getting back into hard solipsism and sort of, I'm not going to veer too much out of it, but really there's a couple of base level presuppositions I have to make in order to even engage with what appears to be reality. I have to assume that my senses are true for a certain level of accuracy, and I do realize that that can be fooled. I have to presuppose the logical absolutes, law of non-contradiction, law of excluded middle, law of identity. Now, with that, those things, those laws of logic, we can build a logical system. Logical systems build rationality. Rationality then leads to, making rational decisions, and so you can trust those rational decisions. But I'm not going to go too much into sort of the hard solipsism side, but generally it's because of rationality we can believe that the decisions that we are making and the input from our senses into the reality we see, we can be confident of the consequences of those decisions.
Gotcha. So, Smokey, you going to respond to that? Go ahead.
No, I'm good. Yeah, you can move on.
We'll go to what's the takeaway for praise. I guess this is addressed to Mark. If torturing people is good for the torturer's psychological health, how do we decide whose psychological health to protect?
Yeah, so because of those base level things, empathy and reciprocity, torturing people is never good for the person doing it, not psychologically. They will feel, they will be messed up, basically, because doing that is antithetical to the biological imperatives that we feel to construct a society, basically. We construct herds, and we construct these tribes, we construct these systems because it's good for us. It helps us survive. Not that is the only imperative, but when you're looking at whether you're doing something, and remember, I addressed this by saying there's certain biological needs that we have, both physical and psychological, that can't be violated because they are integral to the well-being of that person. So bodily autonomy would be the one that is being violated there. Now, if a person liked being hurt for some reason, BDSM or some kind of thing, and the other person liked doing it, and it wasn't harming anybody, and it was with consent, it wasn't violating that bodily autonomy, then yeah, I don't think that would be immoral. I think that would be consent. Yeah, so that would be a violation of that. And like all of these things, and this is why I made the disclaimer at the start. I said morality is complex, and we have to discuss the well-being benefit to yourself and to society, and come to an understanding of how they're benefiting, and what we're getting out of them.
Gotcha. Smoke, can you respond to that?
Yeah, I can say something to that real quick. Keep coming back to the two pillars of secular humanist morality, empathy and reciprocity, which I did address, are purely subjective in their scope and application, so can't possibly build any real functional system off of them. In fact, elitism proves that. Elitism basically removes empathy from the agent. This is why you have, socialistic governments and countries that treat their citizens like fodder just to be fed off of. Empathy does not run universal. And interestingly enough, certainly I think Mark would allow for the idea that these ancient cultures that he's calling immoral, even though he has no justification for it, but he's still calling them immoral, also had empathy and reciprocity. And if he doesn't believe that their moral codes actually came from a god, that it was basically just a cultural construct that seems to be, again, based upon the standard that he cleans to, empathy and reciprocity, then they were operating by the same metric, that they were doing the best in their culture to manifest those things that they thought were well-being through empathy and reciprocity. So really in the process, he's basically just validating that they were perfectly moral. And I guess I'm okay with that. So.
Yeah, so now Smokey's getting it. They thought they were doing the best by their culture, but now we have a greater understanding of what harms society. and slavery does harm society, not just the slaves. It affects everybody. And we have a better understanding of the human psyche and psychologically what causes people to be damaged and harmed. So yeah, Smokey's correct. They thought they were doing the best for society with reciprocity and empathy. That's right. I can demonstrate, if they had the knowledge that I have, I could demonstrate to them how they're damaging their own society and how they're damaging themselves psychologically by brutalizing people. But they don't have the knowledge that we have now. They don't have the benefit of all of the advances that we've worked towards over the years. So just taking somebody from that area and saying, hey, you're damaging your society and the people around you and yourself, they wouldn't understand that. But we do now. And reality very, very clearly demonstrates that this is the case. We kind of go along, find out that, hey, we're not helping people by enslaving them. We're damaging them. We slowly gain this knowledge. Hey, invading other countries and making them have your culture is not actually helpful for them. But the people of the British, they thought they were civilizing the nations. They thought they were giving civilization to these people. We know now that it's wrong because it doesn't actually help them. And it doesn't help you either. Your society is worse for having done that. And these are the things that we now know that for some reason weren't universally given out to these old tribes, which unfortunately Smokey can't explain why. Silence.
Was it moral to storm Waco?
I'm sorry, I didn't realize that was towards both of us. Is that?
No, to you. Was it moral to storm Waco?
So you want to go on another discussion?
Well, do you mind? Real quick, do you mind?
Was it moral to storm Waco? I think that it may have been immoral to use the things that they did. Was it moral? Yeah, to storm it. Yes, I think that they made some really bad decisions to the way that they did it. But yeah, I would say so.
There you go. Thank you. Just validated the Jews. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
so,
it really didn't.
Yeah, let's go to the next question here.
Because I said it was immoral the way they did it, so it really didn't. Sorry.
So we make that pitch.
It's always the way. It's always the
it's the way you how do you not understand
the way to do it better?
Well, how do you not understand that the way that you take actions to do something is more important than what you do? How do you not understand that?
Dude, it's
like if you silence a baby by shooting it as opposed to cuddling it and giving it love, how do you not understand that those are two different things?
You're making an extreme out of a situation that has no possible higher.
No, I'm just amazed that you don't understand that, that sort of going in and shooting everybody could be immoral, yet capturing them could be moral. I don't understand that.
No, the point was that it was important to stop it no matter what. Like and so the idea was it needed to be stopped. Now, of course, the intention was to do it with probably the least amount of potential bloodshed. But in the point where that can't be mitigated and it just needs to be stopped, it's like you find out that we're living in this country and we have rules and laws and things that we expect of our culture. And then you have someone who's living in a little pocket, brutalizing each other. Well, you go in and you stop it.
Yeah, so Smokey's hot take is that going in and killing children is
we're not going to get out of here so we
were doing bad things.
Okay.
That's the hot take for tonight. Okay. Congratulations.
So, question for you, Mark.
Yes, they're all for me. They're all for me.
Yes, they are. They're coming at you. What is the definition of a Christian?
See, I looked this up. Give me 1 second, because I mean, there's a lot of different definitions, and as I tried to point out the definitions that, thanks there, Smokey. The definition of a Christian was just somebody adhering to or following, relating to a person who has received Christian baptism or is a believer in Christianity. And I would just say it is a person who is a believer in Christianity. That's it. That's Oxford Dictionary, actually. Just, not that I really
I would have gone to a theological dictionary, but sure, okay, that's fine.
Why a theological dictionary?
Well, I mean, it's a theological question, isn't it? I mean, you don't go to like Webster's for philosophical.
No, it's a definitional question. It's a definitional question.
So you go to Webster's for philosophical definitions?
No, it's just a definitional question. It's just a definition. It's how people use it. Definitions don't prescribe reality. They don't say, because a Christian is someone following Christianity, then that must be the only way you can use Christianity ever in the world. No, that's not the normative definition. It's just a believer in Christianity. That's it. That's Christian. So, well, I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but that is a Christian. You know, definitions, they're varied. There's multiple ones, and they all can be used. It doesn't make one true and one false or one more correct than the other. They're just usages of words. Why is this so hard for you?
I'm wondering why it's so hard for you to not understand that there's different definitions for words based upon which field of study you're relating to. I'm surprised you don't know that. Steve McRae would ream you for that one. You might want to chat with him about that.
There is no philosopher that would sit there, except the most rabid Christian philosophers, that would sit there and go, Catholics aren't Christian.
All right, so that's going to finish that question. Our last question.
Merriam-Webster's second definition of or relating to people who follow the teachings of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and Catholics are people that follow Jesus Christ and his teachings.
No, they don't. Not if they were killing people.
That's your opinion. That's your subjective opinion.
Not if they were killing people. Show me the teaching of Christ where it says
they say they do. They
show
say
me the
they
teaching
were.
of Christ that said to kill people.
Just basically saying they're not Christian because they don't hold up to your subjective interpretation of what Christianity says is no reflection on whether they're Christian or not. Catholics are Christian. I'm afraid to burst your bubble, but Catholics are Christian.
You're ridiculous.
They're Christian.
Show me the teaching of Christ that says to go kill people and subject them and force them to conversion under the sword. Show it to me.
So if we look at what happened to the Canaanites and stuff,
the teaching of Christ that says you are supposed to go do what the Catholics did.
Okay, so there's a parable in Luke where a guy
I don't want to derail this too much because there's one.
Well, I mean, he asked.
Just let him answer, please.
Please
let him just answer.
He asked.
No, that's fine. No, I'm just saying I don't
want
to.
So in this parable, the king says to anybody that doesn't, I'll just find it. It's Luke. Luke 19:26. I tell you, everyone who has more will be given, but one who has nothing, even what they have will be taken away. But those enemies of mine who did not want me to be king over them, bring them here and kill them in front of me. Parable from Jesus. Well done.
And what was the parable to say?
You're asking for where it says to do that.
Wait,
that's
what's
a parable that says
Mark?
to do that.
Hey, Mark, what's a parable?
It's a religious story that has moral implications.
Okay, we'll deal with this in the after show.
Look, you said, say me something where you could interpret that. That's what it says.
Let's move on, please. I'll deal with that in the after show.
Yeah, we got to get this rolling here. So, last question of the night, Gavin Hurlman.
Wow, how very nice of you, dude. Wow.
Yeah, let's start with.
Well, you're the one saying that Catholics aren't Christian. I mean, how ridiculous is that? Are Catholics Christians, Smokey? I want to clip this. Hold on.
A lot of the Christians in the chat agree, Mark. Make sure you clip
Catholics,
that too.
I don't care what your rabid religious stuff is. Are Catholics Christian? I want to clip this. Are Catholics Christian?
Modern Catholics, most of them, no.
But not other Catholics. Catholics aren't Christian. Is that what you're saying?
Well, which era of Catholicism are you talking about? Catholic.
Any era. No, you said before Catholics aren't Christian. Is that what you believe?
First 500 years.
You said that Catholics aren't Christian. Is that what you believe?
Modern Catholics? No. Yeah, I don't think most of them are Christian, no.
Okay, got it. Cheers. Thank you. This will do the rounds. This will be fun. Cheers.
Okay. They don't
Is
fit the definition, so I mean, I don't know why that's
They
controversial.
do meet every definition except for your weird one, and that's you're
I got
such a
it from
joke.
Merriam-Webster. I read it to you.
You're hilarious, dude. You
I read it
really
to you.
are. No,
Merriam-Webster.
and that's only because you twist what Christianity is to
We're
what
relating
you
to
think it
people who
is.
follow
And
the
then you go,
teachings of
oh,
Jesus
anybody
Christ.
that doesn't act in the way I think Christianity should be is not a Christian. It's a no true Scotsman. It's
We're
bloody
relating to
obvious.
people who follow the teachings of Jesus Christ. And I see Catholics doing a lot of things that are not following.
And
Let's
they
bring this
say they
back.
follow
Come
it,
on,
and you don't
guys.
get to decide who is and who isn't because of your weird definition in
The
your little
Bible
echo
decides.
chamber that says,
The Bible
hey,
Let's
yeah, but their interpretation of the Bible says they
Irrelevant.
do.
Let's
put a
You've got
lid on
nothing
this.
to
Let's put a
stand
lid
on, and
on
you're
it.
sitting there
Don't get me
going,
wrong.
because
Hey
I'm in an
guys,
echo
I'm gonna
chamber.
start
And
muting. I'm gonna start muting. We gotta put a lid on it. We gotta put a lid
you're
on it.
hilarious, man.
Irrelevant.
We gotta put a lid on. Okay, so here's the last question: is the command to love your neighbor as you would love yourself rational, and why don't atheists adopt this?
Okay, so there's a fatal flaw in that. So love thy neighbor as you love yourself kind of thing. There's a fatal flaw, as well as the golden rule that Jesus put across, actually treat others unto how you would like to be treated yourself. So what happens if I hate myself, right? What happens if you're a antisocial person that all they want to do, and you know, you hear about it and you see it maybe, that all they want to do is go out and get into a fight. Okay, here's a problem. Because if you are commanded to love them as you love yourself, that person is going to hate people. I mean, it's not something that I think a lot of people think about, but it's a fatal flaw in that system. Or if you're commanded to do unto others as you would have done unto you, and all you want to do is get into a fight, all you want to do is someone to attack you, that by itself, and I'm not saying that Christianity only has one moral rule, but that by itself has a fatal flaw. It means that all you should do, or you ought to do according to that commandment, is go around and look for a fight. That's a problem. And that's why there are better systems than what is outlined in the Bible. In fact, the Egyptians had a better system because it was a positive inference rather than a negative inference, or a negative inference rather than positive, sorry. So it was actually slightly better, not perfect, but slightly better.
Smokey, if you want to respond to that, or we can just call it.
What was the question again? One more time. I kind of got lost in a lot of that.
Is the command to love your neighbor as you would yourself rational and just, and why don't atheists adopt
thank
it?
you. Yeah, I think what I heard Mark do was do what he shouldn't do, because then it would undermine his own perspective too, which would be appeal to the fringe. Like, so to say that this can't be universal because someone might hate themselves, but it really, honestly, that's nothing but modern pop culture psychobabble. Everyone loves themselves, and that's just kind of a natural normative state of affairs. Even people that claim to hate themselves ultimately are usually being selfish in some type of way and loving themselves in some sort of intrinsic fashion. Selfishness comes very natural to mankind. So recognizing it as a normative state of affairs, that you would want to be treated the way that you're treated, because generally you want to be treated well. You want to be treated well. So because you want to be treated well, you'll want to treat others well. And that's where the golden rule applies. But trying to take it to the fringe of like some radical person who hates themselves, if that even really actually exists, is just kind of desperate emotional pleading, because you could do the same thing for his perspective. Well, what about empathy? What about the people that have none? What about the psychopaths and the sociopaths? Like, you wouldn't want to use the fringe to try and justify the failure of the rule itself. So anyway, that would be my response.
Very good. It was a boast. We'll probably just going to end it right there, call it a night. I appreciate the discussion. It was intense and it was passionate. So I think that's something that there's nothing wrong with.
I love moral debates. I love them.
Me too. I appreciate your time, Mark, Reid, and also Smokey.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Good time.
There will be
Sorry,
an after show.
Thank you very much for having me on. I really enjoyed it. That was great.
My pleasure. And if you want to just get a hold of me in the email if you want another debate, because we have other debaters out there, Mark, so just let me know.
Yeah, sure.
All right, guys. Appreciate it. We're going to call it a night, and there's going to be an after show on my channel, but if there's any others, let me know, and I'll promote it really quickly. If not, I'm just going to shut it down.
Is your after show already scheduled, Praise, or no?
Yeah, it's
okay. I'm going to shout it out on my social too. I'll pop in for a bit too and hang out.
Cool, man. And Mark, you're welcome too. You're invited. So yeah, it's up to you if you don't
Sure.
want to.
Yeah, I'll have to check out. I'm on Amy Newman's channel a lot, so I'll check out what she's
Yeah.
doing for after show. But yeah, thank you very much for having me on. Thank you for providing a spirited debate, Smokey. And yeah, no, I really look forward to doing this again. It'll be fantastic.
Awesome, guys.
Cool.
Well, we're going to say good night, and for everyone to take care, and God bless. Take care. Later. See you.